All right, I think we are live. So, welcome everyone to another live stream here. Hopefully, you guys are all having a good weekend here and excited to be doing another one of these weekly live streams for you guys. So, thanks to everyone who's joined here so far. Like all the other live streams, just to lay it out there for anyone who's new here, we always go for about 2 hours or so, ideally. I'm going to go through as many comments as I can, but I will be giving priority answering to anyone who's a member or anyone who does a super chat or super thanks or whatever. Those will get priority. But otherwise, just hang out here and just talk cars with all you guys. So hopefully you're, like I said, having a good weekend, and hopefully you're digesting the news here from the weekly update. Okay, with the end of the Camaro and the exciting debut of the Demon, but of course that also being the end of an era. It's some pretty crazy news this week, and so it's unfortunate. We'll see what happens. I know I did get some comments, people saying that it doesn't seem like the Camaro is actually over because the GM vice president or someone said that the Camaro story isn't over, but that was so vague that to me that isn't something that gives me a lot of reassurance that we're going to see a V8 powered two-door coupe in the future from the Camaro name. We'll see, but the way things are going these days with companies taking names and repurposing them, saying the Camaro story and not just the Camaro. If they would have said the Camaro isn't over, that even would have given me a little more hope. But saying the Camaro story, that seems a little vague and a little open to interpretation, which gives them the leeway to then just do whatever they want to do with the name. So we shall see. The rumors are saying there's going to be some type of electric sedan or SUV or both, or something else. We'll see. But we'll see how that plays out. But for those of you who are, hopeful for something, that's a two-door V8, I wouldn't hold your breath for that. Get one of the 6th gens here. Sorry, I'm adjusting my camera. Get one of the 6th gens while you can. I know some people also said, there's the V8, the new V8 investment that GM's doing, and that could potentially, mean that we're going to be getting some type of new thing. But the thing is, they said that was mostly a truck motor. I'm inclined to believe them because the truck volumes are going to be way higher than anything from, Camaro or Corvette. So that really is what's justifying, a new V8. And so, maybe we'll get lucky and that'll trickle down to some sports cars, if I'm retuning that motor for sports car use. But, I don't know. I'd like to be wrong, but the pessimistic side of me thinks they're going to try and compete with the Mustang, which is most likely going electric here in the next few years. So you'll have to wait and see. But anyway, I see we have a few people who have joined here, so thanks for joining too. And Newt Media, thank you so much, Zach, for joining in. And yeah, he's saying, pull it forward and reuse the name was probably what's going to happen. Rafi, thanks also for joining. Says, woohoo, hi, Matt, happy Sunday, and rest in peace to the Camaro. The Camaro name will probably go like the Eclipse Cross. Yeah, that's my worst fear, and also probably what's most likely. Truck and Car Guy, thanks also for joining. He says, bittersweet with both the Camaro and the Challenger Charger, awesome cars. And then Ted says, please talk about the hope for a decent 25 grand EV commuter car like the ID2 All, and how Tesla and the Hyundai Kia might make ones for the US market. Yeah, I mean, Tesla's, been talking about it and kicking it around, at least for Europe. I think the thing is, right now with current technology, in order to make a 25 grand EV, it's going to have a small battery. The ID2, is a pretty small battery. Not too small, though, honestly, for that. But, and Tesla maybe could work some magic potentially. But, I think that's the thing is they're looking at how Americans react to the current crop of EVs. And what is the thing? Oh, well, 200 miles of range isn't enough. And I want 300 plus miles of range. I want to be able to go across the country and back on a single charge. And, all these crazy demands that Americans have. And I think, in Europe, people are more practical. They buy for what they need, not for their aspirational ideals of what they might want to do someday. And so, city cars work for that reason, because people are like, I never drive more than 30 miles a day. I will buy a car that can go 30 miles and I don't care if it goes any further than that, so it's just tough. I haven't actually really heard about Hyundai and Kia making anything small. There's just the talks I mentioned this past week about how Genesis is considering a small luxury EV for Europe, but that obviously wouldn't be affordable. So, I think Chevy's really leading the way. I think they are really the ones, they have the Equinox EV, which already I think is going to be pretty much the ideal EV for Americans, at least as close to ideal as you can get in the year 2023. And I think that that's going to be really huge. And then they're talking about stuff that's even cheaper than that. So I think they're going to try and come up with some kind of ID2 all competitor, but Americanize it. And, hopefully that will do well. But I think GM, that's one thing I really got to respect them for, is they are really focusing on the affordable thing. They already are with the Bolt, and aside from like the Nissan Leaf, there's really nothing else. So I really commend Chevy for going into that segment, even though it's not popular or sexy right now. Two says, "Hey Matt, I heard Toyota just bought the rights to the name Maran Green. Shell much, buddy." Yeah, it'd be great if I could name a color someday. That'd be fun, an honorary color. Although there's nothing to honor me for, but yeah, it'd be fun to see Maran Green. Gotta do the Dark Highland Green here. It's the way to go. Double Strike Photo says, "Hey Matt, looking forward to getting some ideas from folks here to justify a short range, high power EV like an Ioniq 5N. If we can come up with a rationale to help me justify it, I'll buy it ASAP." Well, there you go, guys. Have at it. As far as what I can say is, it just comes down to your usage case. That's like with anybody. Sometimes EVs will fit better for some people than others, and some people you just can't get around it. They have to drive 3 hours to go to Walmart, and they're always driving 500 miles a day. Like, obviously, an EV is just not going to work for those people. So it really comes down to, what your usage case is. But the thing is, though, with those EVs, like even like I've heard some other journalists talking about this with the Kia EV6 GT, where it's like, the range is already rated lower. And then if you're actually enjoying that rate or enjoying that power, then the range drops really fast. And then, you're down to really low range, which is fine if you're doing a 50-mile fun drive and that's it, but if you're doing some type of long all day enthusiast thing or something, you're going to have to make sure you're planning your lunch stops around, charging stations. But at least if you're getting the Hyundai or the Kia or something like that, you're at least going to have a fast recharge time. So that, at least helps you a little bit there. And Triton Car Guy says Matt is going to have to stock up on whiskey at this rate, the way this is all going. Thankfully, yeah, I did actually stock up on some whiskey. I asked for a bunch of whiskey for my birthday last year. And so I am pretty well stocked to get me through the next few years here of disappointing cars going away and new car announcements, most likely. So although if I go through it as fast as I did this past week, then it might not last me very long. I'll have to restock again. And DuckTales is asking, how well do you think the Dodge Hornet will sell? I think the GT version has a solid chance. I think that one can really do, it's really going to also, I think what really hurts sales for a lot of these things is, one, just supply these days, but also how dealers and how manufacturers are sending and speccing cars. Sometimes dealers have control over that, other times they don't. But either way, just whatever shows up on the lot, if the stuff on the lot is going to be RTs that are all 50 grand, they'll all sit and no one's going to touch them. There's going to be very few people, I think, that are going to go for the RT version. And that's why I chose to focus on the GT in my review, because actually whenever I got to the event, we were heading out to the cars in the morning there, they actually assigned us a car already. Some of these press events, you can go and request a car, or you just stand in line and you take whatever's left. But for this Dodge event, they already pre-assigned us vehicles. I'm not sure how they decided who should get what, but they were like, here you go, you're going to get an RT. And I think they probably just said, hey, let's put them in the fastest thing possible. Totally understand that. But I was like, actually, can I swap for a GT? And I was thankfully able to find someone who was willing to swap and wanted the RT, and then it worked out. But I was like, no, I don't want to drive the RT aside from a short little thing, which you saw in my video. I did a short little, loop, tested out the electric thing, tested out the launch and all that. And then, called it good, because I think the GT is really where it makes the most sense. And if you don't care about all the extra options, and honestly, if you're okay with cloth seats, I mean, the standard stuff in that thing is so good. I'd probably lean pretty close to a base model. I don't even think I'd go for the plus model unless you really want the heated and cooled seats and stuff. But honestly, I think that, a 30 grand or 32, 33 after destination, whatever ends up being, but a base GT is a great deal and a really fun option. And you also undercut the CX-30 turbo at that price point. And that's where I think it makes the most sense. Anything beyond that, and then you're paying for the performance a little bit more. And, then it really comes down to, will this motor hold up as long as the Mazda motor? And, reliability is still up in the air. And I know Alpha has said like they are adamant on like they want to have Lexus level reliability. Their CEO said that, and that's going to take them a few years to get there. So I don't know if we're there yet, but it shows they're trying to really, make these motors strong. And one thing with the GT is like it has port and direct injection, which really helps. So you don't have to worry about, getting the valves, caked up with all the, I can't remember, carbon or whatever, the carbon buildup. So, I don't know. I still would be inclined to think that the CX-30 Turbo is going to last longer and would probably be the better buy from a long-term standpoint. But the thing is also Dodges lease very well. So if you can lease like a base model GT for some crazy good deal, in a few months or something, then I think that could make a lot of sense in a lot of different ways. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but I think that the Hornet has a decent shot if they order and stock them correctly. And let me see here, other questions. So MDTT says, what's up? Watching this as I'm reassembling my car. That's awesome. I'd love to hear what you're working on there, but thanks for joining. And also thanks for being a supporter here for over a year. I really appreciate it, MDTT. It really, really means a lot. And Adam says the Ioniq 5 charges really fast and comes with free EA charging. So it's actually a great road tripper, assuming you're on roads that have EA chargers, since half of them are usually broken. Yeah, which it really comes down to where you're at in the country and honestly your luck, because I used exclusively EA chargers on our trip across Pennsylvania to the New Jersey coast last year. No problems. One of them I had to wait a few minutes because there was, they were all taken, but that was it. I know I probably got super lucky. We'll see if we do any road trips this year, if the experience changes. But yeah, if you're a road tripper, I mean, it is nice to have the free charging. You could save a ton of money, but otherwise I would just recommend a plug-in hybrid for any person who loves road tripping. And especially if you have limited patience and don't like planning things, I think it's best to just fly by the wind and just, get anything that uses gas. Carlos, also, thank you so much for joining here and for also being another over year member. I really appreciate the support this past year. And he says, hey Matt, how's everything going? So I'm finally getting my GR86 on Wednesday. So excited to finally have it. That's awesome. I'm so excited for you. Please send me a picture whenever you get it. I'd love to see it. I'm so excited for you. I'm also a little bit jealous as well, because I still really want one of those myself, but not more than I want the Bullet. So I'm still so torn though. Yeah. We'll see. If the Bullet ever like really upsets me or lets me down or something, then that would be, I'd go straight to GR86. 2 says, send this to your Toyota contact. Just lift their Japanese wagons a few inches and they'll sell like hotcakes in the US. Actually, probably would work on any wagon sold overseas. Yeah. And that's one thing, I think Ford there's rumors that they were working on some type of Outback competitor. But really, it seems like Subaru is the only one that can get away with that, at least well. It is so funny how, like, no one really likes the Impreza hatchbacks in general. I mean, they sell decently well, but then you lift it up a few inches, call it the Crosstrek, and like the amount of people that don't even make the connection or don't care about the connection, that it's just a lifted Impreza, is hilarious. But like Subaru gets away with it, like, and no one else can, and it's so funny how it doesn't work for anybody else. I mean, like I thought the Buick Regal Torex was a great idea. I was like, oh, this is going to be a great competitor. It was really, I think, pretty well set up, pretty competitive as far as pricing and stuff goes. And then it just bombed. It didn't help that GM kind of dissolved their whole partnership with, Opel and Vauxhall and all that stuff, which kind of produced those cars. But they're great cars. My father-in-law actually has a Regal Torex, loves it. It's been great for him so far. But yeah, seems like no one can get away with that unless you're Subaru. So MDTT says he's working on color accenting on the interior and fixing a couple panels and stuff. Awesome. Very, very cool. Color accenting is fun. I'm happy to see that's coming back more and more in car interiors. It's something I really loved, and I've always loved even like the Miata, how they have like the color matching top of the door panels there, that matches the outside. Things like that I think are just really cool. 2-track jacks. I had missed the base Hornet engine was dual fuel injected. That's promising. Yeah, and I think a lot of companies are realizing that that's clearly the better way to go. If you're wanting that direct injection, especially if you're talking about, higher performing engines, it makes sense to have that, port. And that's what I love about the Bullet. The Coyote V8 has that too. And they added, it went from port to then port and direct combined. And so that was one key advantage for this current or the past generation here of the V8 over the EcoBoost. The EcoBoost is just direct injected and they had to worry about that after you got to high miles. But now they've even saw the light with the EcoBoost here, and that's one thing they announced with the 2024 EcoBoost. It'll have port and direct injection, which is a huge upgrade. And if I had a current gen EcoBoost, that alone would be like, all right, I'm going up with a new one just for that. I'll live with the huge screens or whatever, just because that's a huge improvement. But I love that in the Bullet. Really gives me peace of mind for long-term stuff. And Samus says, what do you think of Savage Geese? Do you ever watch anyone else's content? Thanks for joining, Samus. I love Savage Geese. Those guys are great. Jack, I talk to him on a fairly regular basis, and Mark I talk to as well every once in a while. And it's great talking to them and catching up, especially on events. They're super cool guys. They do some of the best car videos on YouTube currently. And they are some of my favorites out there. If I really want to know, if I want to know the deep dive stuff, because honestly, some of these manufacturers don't even provide us with a lot of stuff, and Savage Geese has to go out and find all this in-depth stuff and talk to engineers and really dig down to get this kind of engineering support for some of their videos. So like, if I want to know all the details and really understand the engineering behind a car, I watch one of their videos too to inform myself, because it's stuff that I can't even get my hands on pretty easily as far as information. So it's really impressive what they're doing. I hope they can keep doing it forever. I know it's kind of tough with their videos because they have such high production value that it makes it really tough to sustain. So I hope that that's something they can do for a long time. But it's impressive stuff, their videos. As far as anyone else's content that I watch, I have very little time to watch YouTube videos. But when I do, I do watch some of my buddies every once in a while. It depends on, the car and all that stuff. And one of the channels I really love that I don't really have time to watch as much anymore, but Carfection. I've always loved Henry Catchpole. He's so good, and kind of one of the people I aspire to be as good as far as presenting while driving. And also I have a soft spot for a lot of the British, supercars and all the exotic stuff. I love watching those the most, because I'm still one of those people that likes watching the aspirational cars. I know a lot of people, it's like, this is unrelatable and they don't have any interest in it, but I still love, seeing what the new Ferraris are like, the new Lamborghinis. So I'll go to their stuff. And I mean, there's a few others that I watch. I really like some of Haggerty's stuff. Obviously, Jason Camisa's hilarious and amazing and super nice as well. I got to hang out with him actually on the GT500 launch back in what was that, 2019, I think, for that one. And super nice guy. And so yeah, had some good times talking to him. He actually has some Pittsburgh roots, and so we were able to kind of talk about Pittsburgh stuff for a good while there on the GT500 launch. But there's a few others too. I can't always think of them off the top of my head because I don't watch them on a regular enough basis. But there's a bunch of really good channels out there. Let me see here. I'm gonna find my place here so I don't miss any questions. Carlos says, offer is still on the table to review. Just let me know. I appreciate the offer. I'm hoping that Toyota does send me the anniversary edition to try out the exhaust and stuff for the GR86, because it's always fun driving another one of those. Kyle, thank you so much also for joining and for being a member for over a year. I really appreciate the support from you as well. He says, after the news of the Camaro, I wonder how much faster they will sell off the lot. My dealer sells them while they're in transit. Wow. Well, I'm happy to hear that. Your dealer's, I think, one of the exceptions as far as that goes. They seem to be sitting. I know even I drove past my Chevy dealer just the other day, and a couple of Camaros on the lot, no one touching them. But yeah, I think there's certainly some people that might scramble whenever you see it's ending. But I think a lot of people also try and time it so like no one will touch them for the next 8 months, and then like right towards the end of the year they're like, aha, I got one of the last ones, just to say they have one of the last ones. So I don't know. I think we'll see. I think also one of the things that may drive people, just aside from like even the Camaro going away, but also just the amount of people that are going to be running to the Camaro because it's going to be cheaper than the Mustang now, and the fact that yes, the Camaro has less power, but if you don't need to have the most horsepower, then I think it makes the most sense to go for the Camaro because it's going to be cheaper and it's still a really solid vehicle. It still drives great, and it's just a really, really fun car. So I think that may certainly help as well. Truck and Cargo, thank you so much for gifting 10 memberships. So generous of you. I really appreciate it. And so anyone, if you have your gifting turned on, you can grab those memberships. I know we have mostly members in here at this point, I think. So these are getting grabbed up as fast as they used to be. But I appreciate you putting those out there. And while everyone's grabbing those, I'm going to answer some more questions here. Thank you so much for that. I really, really appreciate it. And it's great to also grow the community of members. I'm gonna be posting a blooper reel here probably on Tuesday. It's short but kind of funny, just extra little member exclusive thing, and in addition to all the other things that I do on there. But I really appreciate the growing of the community. It's really, really fun. All right, so Rafi says, I do crave for a Crosstrek STI. It would have been awesome. I found someone local who had done an STI swap and it was cool, sounded amazing. Yeah, and that's another one, we've talked about this in the past live streams, how Subaru is one of the companies that makes the most head-scratching decisions sometimes. I mean, that would be an easy money printer. I mean, not even a Crosstrek STI, just do a Crosstrek WRX or whatever you want to call it, Crosstrek XT, and just put the WRX guts in there. It works with a manual. We know that, the Crosstrek is set up. It can accept a manual. It's just easy money. I mean, that would be so many people would go for the Crosstrek, XT if they did something like that. And also not even just because of the fact that there's enthusiasts, but it was funny whenever I was on the launch for the Crosstrek 2.5 for the last generation. That was like a weird, like mid-COVID launch that they did. But with that, they said like we added the 2.5 because we found that people wanted more power than what the 2-liter offered, especially up in the mountains. It's like, that's great, but the 2.5 is still naturally aspirated. So yeah, you're giving people a little more power up in the mountains, but the silver bullet to give people the best amount of power in the mountains is a turbo. And Subaru knows this. They have all the parts there, but they haven't put them together. And I don't know, maybe their market research has shown that they wouldn't have enough demand for it. Again, I can't be an armchair, quarterback here as far as product planning goes, but it certainly seems like it's worth a try, at least from the outside. Yeah, I don't know why they haven't done a turbo Crosstrek yet. And Adam says, I agree with Matt. The Hornet GT is the way to go. Dodge is currently offering a GT all drive lease for $449 a month for 36 months. That's honestly pretty solid with the rates these days and stuff. I didn't realize they're already cutting deals on them. That's impressive. So, and it's just going to get better depending on how they sell, I guess. If they're super hot, then maybe it won't get any better. But if that's the starting point here, and it's just going to get better from there at some point down the road, yeah, to me, that'd be a solid buy, because I doubt you'll be able to get a CX-30 turbo for $449 a month for a lease. And I also see Greg says Savage Geese is good, but he's so monotone, kind of Debbie Downer sometimes. That's, I think that's true. I think those guys are kind of, burned out a little bit, and they have a little bit more of a pessimistic view on things sometimes, but it is realistic. I don't agree with everything that they say, but I can appreciate their viewpoint on a lot of these things. And yeah, it's one of those things, once you've, seen enough of these things, it's one of those things where I'm trying to think of like how to put this. It really comes down to your personal preferences and stuff, but I think, as far as the way they would like to see the car industry to go, it's not heading in that direction. But I'm kind of the type of person that looks for the silver lining in these things. And I'm like, yes, it's not the same. And yes, it's a real bummer. We can't have the things that we currently like and love, into the future as far as new vehicles go. Obviously, we can all drive our current vehicles till the wheels fall off of them and then put new wheels on and drive them for another 100 years. But as far as the new stuff goes, yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's not like all hope is lost. And someone actually made a really good comment in the weekly update this past week, where they were like, this is kind of like the 80s all over again. And we will see, but as the months and the years go by, it seems like we really are mirroring the 80s in a lot of ways. Like, not only was it like, okay, well, you had the fuel crisis and stuff in the 70s, and then that forced everyone to go into little tiny hatchbacks and stuff. Obviously, we don't have, a fuel crisis necessarily. Last year was expensive, but, that didn't really seem to change buying habits very much. But as far as, now it's like, the EV push is happening. And we also now have high interest rates and crazy high inflation like we had in the early 80s. So it's really like history repeating itself in some ways, not perfectly, but pretty close to it. And so, we will see, if someone cracks the hydrogen thing or the e-fuels thing does work out, then we can have, the late 90s, early 2000s all over again, where it's like, woohoo, the giant feed engines are back. And we have, the next generation of insanity, just like, everyone was sad in the 60s, everything's going away. Everyone was sad in the 70s. They even were getting rid of convertibles in the late 70s. And, Cadillac was like, this is our last convertible we're ever going to sell because of safety regulations. And then, 7 or 8 years later, convertibles came back. So anyone who's been around the car world for several decades or knows your history, these things kind of go in waves. I'm not convinced that it will be electric everything forever. And I think maybe it will be, and maybe the hydrogen thing will just be used to produce electricity. But either way, things will get better. And we're also not in the penalty box vehicles we were in the 80s. These EVs are crazy fast. Obviously, they're very expensive, which is unfortunate. But as far as the performance is there. So from an enthusiast standpoint, it's not like we're all forced to drive around in 80 horsepower, little beer cans. They're solid cars still, which is a stark difference from the early 80s. But anyway, get back to the other questions here. And Double Spray Photo says, Matt, I don't always watch YouTube, but when I do, I prefer Dos Equis. I love those commercials. The Dos Equis commercials are great. And I do love a Dos Equis as well. And Sean says, do you watch any motorsports? I don't, partially because, again, having the lack of time doesn't help. Beyond that, I do enjoy watching motorsports. So, I've gone to the Daytona 500. I think some of that stuff, this is going to be kind of stupid to say, but it really is better in person. I don't know, like televised NASCAR races and stuff, and even F1, to me, it doesn't do it for me. I think that kind of stuff is a little less relatable to me. Like if NASCAR actually used stock cars and real cars and not just, these tubular frames with, plastic covering them, like I'd be more interested. If there was a series that actually used real cars, and I know there is like the touring car stuff and other things that are less prominent here in the States. Here in the States, it's just crazy Formula One cars that no one can actually buy and stock cars, which no one can actually buy. And then, you have, like if they televise like a Miata Cup series or something, I'd be more inclined to watch that than watching unrelatable, kind of cars. I'm a stickler for like realism. This is also like, I can't get into video games that are super fantasy related. I like stuff that's like more realistic. Like if it's a war game, I want it to be about like, a realistic war, not some crazy thing. Like I never gone into Halo, things like that for that weird hang up. So that kind of translates over to everything else, including the motorsports. And so unfortunately, there's just not a whole lot out there as far as actual normal cars racing on the track. So that's why I don't watch as much as, I'm sure a lot of other people do. But I respect it for sure. I mean, those people are insane with their abilities and how they drive and stuff. But just never something that caught on very much for me. Maybe if I had more time someday, it could be something I can invest in and try and get into. But if I'm going to watch any kind of sports, it's probably going to be baseball. But even that, I very rarely watch. And says, hey, Matt, just stopping in to say hello and say hello to the Matt Maran Motoring Squad. I hope everyone's doing well. Enjoy your Sunday. Thanks for stopping in. I really appreciate it. Thanks also for being a member and continuing to support the channel. I really appreciate it. Other questions here. Carlos says, mine will have the 10th anniversary exhaust and the 10-inch subwoofer. I can hold off on the AWE exhaust for now. Yeah, I'll be curious to see what your impressions are on that new exhaust. It's interesting they're doing that. Let me see here. So everyone grab those memberships. That's great to see. And welcome to the Matt Maran Motoring Club, everyone there. And I will try and give priority here to all these questions. So Two-Track Jack says, I think there was a Forester STI in Japan. I think they're doing like an STI Sport thing. They have like the TS thing over in Japan and stuff like that. And they had the Forester XT, and they had that here in the States for many years as well. And then I guess that they couldn't justify anymore, and so they got rid of it. And so maybe that's one of the reasons why the Crosstrek, has never happened, because they couldn't make the Forester happen. But as we saw, Subaru sales have now flipped, and they now sell more Crosstreks than Foresters. So if the Crosstrek's the volume leader, then it makes sense to maybe try the turbo motor in that. But I think one thing I also was talking about with some other journalists last week on the Ioniq 6 launch was that Subaru, I think, has the lowest average transaction price in the industry or something like that. So they're very proud of the fact that like people buy affordable Subarus. So I think Subaru is extra allergic to having expensive trims and expensive models because people come to the Subaru dealer because they can buy something under 30 grand that is actually nice and has some decent features on it, and can't say that for all of the other mainstream brands these days. So I think, that's something that, maybe they're scared about offering some kind of expensive, Crosstrek, because they'd have to charge over 30 grand for a turbo Crosstrek most likely. And then that kind of beats why half the people like the Crosstrek, that it's cheap and rugged, so, but I think it's still something, give people the choices. I'm all about choice, give people the choice of what they want to do. and let the market decide, as far as, which one is the most popular trim. 2 says, what trim level has lost their prestige? I think Toyota's SR5 and LE trims aren't what they were in the beginning. What other trim levels do you think fit that category? I think the Honda EX trim, the EX, I remember back when the EX was like, oh, this is the nice upgrade going for the EX trim. And that was one of the higher trims for a while for the Accord and Civic and stuff. And now it's like EX is second from the bottom and doesn't really give you a whole lot or as much as it used to, at least. And that's the one that's really lost its luster, I think, a little bit for me. Other trims, it's a good question though too. I'm trying to think of other stuff. I think it's just funny seeing how, in general, all the Toyota stuff, has kind of, like, even the Sequoia, it's like you start with the SR5s and stuff like that, and then you go up and up and up, and like the Limited is now like a mid-grade. Like, in what world does a Limited being a mid-grade make any sense? Then you have the Platinum, and then you have the Capstone and all that stuff. It just kind of skews everything, at least as far as the traditional idea of what a Limited trim is. That was always the top. And then that kind of got thrown out the window a few years ago. And that's not just Toyota. A lot of companies are doing that where the Limited isn't the top one anymore. So it's just kind of an interesting phenomenon. Truck and Car Guy says, I can at least appreciate that Dodge decided to name their crossover the Hornet. Yeah, I think it's cool. That's one of those names that, didn't upset too many people to bring that back. And it's a cool name. And I like the historical heritage names and leaning on that heritage, even if it is a loose connection. To me, that's better than, calling it the XBZ4, something random. Like, I'd rather have a historical name in that case, so if it's a decision between that one or the other, it'd be cool to have new original names as well. But if that's too much to ask, then go for the historical stuff instead of, some alphabet soup. And Carlos says, I was able to get lucky and get a 5.8 APR for 84 months on the GR86. Payments will be well below 500 a month. That's great. Congrats on, that's a pretty good APR these days too. So I'm glad that you're able to get, to a nice affordable level for yourself. It's great. And hopefully, those will hold their value pretty well too. So that even though, you're stretching it out for a longer payment there, hopefully it'll, hold its value pretty well. It seems like they are, because even like the previous gen BRZs and stuff, I thought they'd really like be dirt cheap these days, especially for the early ones, but they're still holding their value pretty decently well. So I think it's going to be the case for a while with, same thing with G86, they'll hopefully hold their value pretty well here. Simple and Yummy says, if you had to pick between Mercedes, Audi, or BMW, which one do you choose to buy? It depends on which model you're talking about, because depending on which segment, I would probably have a different answer for you for each one. If we're talking as a group decision here, my wife loves Mercedes. That's her favorite, brand as far as attainable stuff goes. So if it was a group decision, then I would say Mercedes for sure, regardless of what segment you're talking about. But if it's just me, myself, I could go for one of the Audis or the BMWs, depending on stuff. Like, for example, I think I would take an RS3 over a CLA 45 or an M2, potentially. I haven't driven the new M2, but, and so if you're talking about that small segment, I'd go Audi. You're talking mid-grade segments. See, it's so hard for me to weigh in on BMWs because I haven't driven any of the new ones, because BMW won't send me press cars. They don't send me on trips. So I have no experience. I still have not driven the current generation 3 Series, which has been out forever. And it's a serious, blind spot that I have, unfortunately. So it's so hard for me to even give any kind of opinion aside from styling impressions on these new BMWs. So yeah, it'll just come down to the segment. Jay, thanks for joining, and happy Sunday, everyone. Amateur Superfan says WRC is fun. That's true. I do love WRC. I think it's one of the motorsports I respect the most. But it's another one that isn't very well televised, at least here in the States. So it's really hard to catch a WRC event. But it'd be another one that I would certainly. I think if I had to go for a motorsport that I would watch, WRC is probably at the top of the list, because it's always goes back to the Subaru fan in me and that whole thing. But it's just so much respect for what those guys do. Yavinder says, hey Matt, I was just joining in, thanks for joining. He says, do you think Dodge should keep the Charger name and make a performance EV sedan? The Charger does make sense for an EV, 100%. I think it's just, Dodge is throwing us curveballs here with the way they've been doing their stuff. I mean, they should have called the thing the Challenger Daytona, that ended up being the Charger, but I know they wanted to do a 68 Charger homage, so they had to call it the Charger. I don't know what they're planning for the actual production thing. After the curveball, they also gave us with the Ram 1500 Rev, which looks very much like just a regular 1500 and not like the crazy concept, I don't know what to expect. Honestly, based on that curveball, I'd be super surprised if we just get like basically a reskinned current gen Challenger and Charger, but just have the new platform underneath and then continue on, but just have them be electrified. Instead of the crazy styling we saw on that Charger Daytona concept. But I would assume they have a proven formula that now works. Everyone has already gotten over the disappointment of the Charger being a four-door over the past 15 years or whatever. So, stick with it as my line of thinking. And yeah, keep the Charger the four-door and then just do the Challenger of the two-door still. We'll see what they end up doing. There's nothing stopping them from doing a Charger four-door and two-door as well. So, I mean, that's, I guess, on the table. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops this year. There's a rumor I talked about this week where that could be coming out here in August, which would be sooner than I was expecting, but that would be great to kind of, answer that big question as far as what they're actually planning on doing for the production stuff. Copper says, so is the new Impreza / Crosstrek actually all new? It doesn't seem like it because the interior looks very similar apart from the tablet screen. Yeah, I have to do more digging. I haven't dug into that aside from, I got to sit in the Crosstrek for about 10 seconds at the New York or at the Chicago Auto Show, because there was a million people around trying to get into that car whenever they first revealed it. So yeah, I need to do more research about that, and I will do that before I do my reviews on those vehicles, which I'm hoping to get in the press fleet here at some point, this summer, I'm guessing. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I thought I read that the Impreza and stuff was basically new because they do have some new components underneath. I know like the steering rack is new because that's from the WRX, and there's some other things that they switched up. So I don't know. I mean, they could just be doing some parts recycling and it's, otherwise new underneath, but I don't have a good answer for you, unfortunately. I need to do more research into that. Amateur Superfan says, I'd buy a Subaru truck if it's a good Tacoma competitor. Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to do a Tacoma competitor for a while. There's talks that maybe they'll be doing, a new Ram thing, but even that, there's talks that could be electric. We already see that, the new Ranger's coming. But I think the Frontier is a pretty solid competitor as well. I was pretty impressed with the Frontier. But Tacoma's, I'm excited to see the new Tacoma here. I think coming this year, it's going to be, I think, pretty good. I know there's talks of it ditching the V6, and that's going to upset a bunch of people. But aside from that, it could be pretty promising. So yeah, be fun if Subaru did something competitive, but I don't think Subaru's got it in them, unfortunately. Linda, thanks for stopping by. And Isaac says, LS turn on Chevys. I'm not sure what you're referencing there, but hopefully, we get the new V8 from Chevy. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the live stream, hopefully that goes into the Camaro as well. The Trucking Car Guy says, I would say both M and AMG have lost a lot of their prestige. Yeah, and Greg agrees, and so does Class Act. Yeah, I think there certainly is some of that as well. I think, yeah, it really comes down to, which models you're talking about. And again, your preference as far as the way they're going with their directions and stuff. I'm just happy they're both continuing to offer, really fast cars, even if they get that speed in different ways. But yeah, I certainly know it's also, I think the volume of those models going up and them being more mainstream, that's just going to crush the prestige a little bit. It's just the way that goes. And so the more of something that's out there, then the less prestigious it is, But anyway, I see Jeremy. I don't want to keep you waiting. Thank you so much for the super chat there, and good morning to you as well. I really appreciate you stopping by here, and thank you so much for the super chat once again. I also see Two says he's off, so thanks for joining. He says his comments brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends. Use the code. This game isn't worth it for insert promo here. Yep, still not saying okay to the Raid Shadow Legends ads. Hopefully that's something I'll never have to do because I guess if they paid well enough, it's whatever. You guys could just skip past it. But trying to do actual relevant ads, like in this past weekly update with the Touch Up Direct one, it's an actual like car related thing that can be helpful for people, and you get a little bit of a discount from the ad. So, hopefully that, I know some of you found that helpful. I think Adam and a few others found that helpful, which is what I'm trying to do with the ads, to actually do stuff that is helpful and informative, and not just cash grabs. So. Double Strike Photo says M and AMG are more about branding and body kits these days, it seems. Yeah, there's certainly some of that, and I think that didn't help when they did the M line and the AMG line stuff and the S line from Audi and all those. But it's also something that kind of works. Dodge reaped the benefits of this as well with putting the sportier looks and sticker packages on the lower versions of the Charger and the Challenger and stuff too. And let me see here. So let me see. Jazzbo says all 441,000 subscribers. I would be all for us writing to BMW to complain that they're not sending press cards to Matt Moran's channel. Yeah, I mean, I've talked to them before about it, and it just comes down to certain manufacturers have a 500-mile limit for a press vehicle. And so to get to my house I get all my press vehicles, most of them from DC. Some of them come from New York, which is even longer. But so just to get to my house from DC is like 250 miles basically. So, if you double that on the trip out and the trip back, they're already at 500 miles without me even driving it anywhere. So that is what they claim. Now, I know that there was BMWs in Pittsburgh in the past as far as press vehicles go. But as far as sorry, I think Beth just texted me. I think there's 3 other memberships that are still out there. If someone wants to grab those, I think you just gotta make sure you have your membership gifting ability turned on. You can grab those. But anyway, so yeah, I think the mileage limit thing is a problem with BMW. That's what they claim. I know in the past they've sent BMWs to Pittsburgh for other journalists, but I think maybe their policy has changed. It would be nice to at least go on the press trips, and I've offered to say that to them as well in the past. Like, you're paying for everyone else's flights to go on these events anyway. It's no extra, for me. But I think BMW also is a little more selective about who they send, and I'm not one of the biggest fish out there, especially these days. So, they send everyone else and get the coverage they want. But yeah, and that's also why I don't get any Jaguar or Land Rover stuff. They also, don't have the budget supposedly to send cars more than 500 miles or, do more than 500 miles on those cars. And they also have a pretty small fleet because Jaguar Land Rover, aren't doing super well financially. So I know their budget for press vehicles and stuff is a little bit lower. So they got to keep them closer to home. There's a few others that won't send me vehicles for that reason. So, I mean, I get the mileage thing. It's just unfortunate because, and I've told BMW this too. I've been like, look, Audi can send me cars. They don't have any problems with it. They're a direct competitor. And even Mercedes, they send me stuff now too. They're not super consistent, but they do send me stuff. So, BMWs should be able to afford it if Audi and Mercedes can. But, everyone's got different budgets to work with and stuff. It's whatever. I'm kind of throwing my hands up in the air about the whole thing. I would love to cover BMWs, and I think they do some really solid stuff. But, I'm also honest, and, maybe they don't love hearing my comments about, how I don't like the styling and stuff too. I don't know, but I'm going to be honest. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. And, if that means I don't get access to a vehicle, then so be it. But I think it's mostly just a mileage thing for them. Omar says, is the Mustang GT comparable to the Type R and Super, mostly looking into interior space and drive smoothness? So as far as interior space and drive smoothness goes, I would say the Mustang is smoother and more spacious than both of those. I would say it's a good bit up. Now, interior spaciousness, if you're talking about the Type R, and you're talking about like, trunk space and things like that, and even, front space is better in the Type R, but I think, the Mustang definitely is smoother than the Type R by a good bit and smoother than the Supra. And then as far as interior space, the Mustang is certainly much roomier than the Supra. The Supra is pretty tight inside. Not much trunk space either. The Mustang easily trumps the Supra as far as those two categories go. But if you want the most interior space, Type R is going to be tough to beat, as far as non-SUVs goes, honestly. So hopefully that helps you a little bit there with your question, and good luck deciding if you're considering between those three. And Copper says, I know that Tacoma is old too, but the new Frontier, regardless of being redesigned, still seems dated from day one. Yeah, and the Frontier it still does have, some datedness to it. But I think that segment of buyers really likes that, honestly. And they don't need to have the fanciest thing. As long as it does the basics and it's cheap or it hits the price point they need it to hit, I think that's really, and that's been the selling point of the Tacoma, the 4Runner, all these things clearly show that a ton of people do not care about having a nice interior or having anything that's super modern. I mean, the interiors are fine in those vehicles, but you look at anything else that's on the market basically these days, and it's gonna be nicer. I mean, a Nissan Versa has a more plush interior than the Tacoma currently, so I mean, it's the same thing with the Frontier. They made it a little bit nicer for sure, but it's not mind blowing with the interior niceties. And I think Ford's going to kind of try and maybe be the leader as far as luxurious stuff goes a little bit there with the new Ranger. But I think there's just not much appetite for, a super edgy, futuristic truck aside from like the Cybertruck potentially, we'll have to see. But Trent Carguy also says there's a reason why people still buy old M3s like the E30, E36, and E46 as opposed to new BMWs. Yeah, which is certainly true. And that's also one of those things though, whenever you have the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia, a lot of that stuff also just appreciates in value and in its appreciation by other people because of the time aspect as well of, the new M3s. Back then it was like, it's getting the fastest thing. The E30 was one of the fastest things at its time. The E36, same thing. They were the hot cars. And so there are some buyers though who still buy the new M3 because it's the fastest thing in that segment. It's the most impressive, whatever the case is. And so there's a lot of that still, goes on. But I think, yeah, there's a lot of charm to those old vehicles, just like there's a charm to any old vehicles, honestly, in a lot of ways. They're all just, a nice snapshot of a bygone era when things were simpler, and that's going to elicit emotional responses out of people that makes them want to, get a piece of that. I'm a sucker for that as well. For me, it goes even further back with, I love stuff from the 40s and the 50s and the 60s where it was really simple and just really, just be kind of a fun time machine to roll around in. So there's some of that I think that goes into those old M3s, appreciating in value as well. I'm glad to see we got a few other people that snapped up some of those memberships. I think there might be one more out there if someone now wants to turn on their gifting. So anyway, also a Double Strike Photo says, so when you started out, I know you were getting a lot of review cars from local dealerships. Is there a reason why you can't do something similar or potentially even do a test drive and report on it? So if you're talking about the BMW thing, I could. I potentially have a soft opening, I guess you could say, kind of with a BMW dealership because I used to work at one. I don't know very many people there anymore, but I could do that. I actually have had. There is someone who is part of a dealership in the Jersey area that offered to let me drive any of the BMWs there. It's just making that trip is, the thing that kind of holds me up from doing that. But yeah, I mean, it's a good point. It probably would make sense to just spend a weekend just driving every new BMW and then just trying to, intersperse them with all my other reviews. So it's not just a BMW fest for, 3 months straight or something. But yeah, that's a good idea. Just to try and cover them. The thing is though too, and I guess I've been spoiled here over the past few years, but I can do better reviews whenever I can actually, spend some more time with them. I can drive more than a few miles with them, and have just less of a time crunch and have the freedom and flexibility to drive them as hard as I want to drive them, and not feel bad about not breaking in a motor on a brand new M3 or something. Things like that are little caveats as well that kind of I get in the way a little bit, but I mean it's still something I can do. And I was so bummed. So Harrison Auto Sales, if you watch the channel a while, I've worked with them and do some used stuff. They had a 2022 M240i that they had on their lot for a couple of weeks. And I was like, I saw that it had popped up and I'm like, man, I got to review that. Everyone's been asking for a review of an M240i. I really need to do this. But I literally was just so jam-packed every single day with other things I had to do, whether it was press vehicles that I had to film while they're here or whatever. Like I could not carve out a few hours to drive out there. It's about a 45-minute drive for me to get out there, but I couldn't carve out the time to get out there and film it before it ended up getting sold. And I was literally like, I was about to have like a gap where I had a few hours one morning where I could, get it in. And then he was like, oh, sorry, like someone's coming to pick it up tomorrow. And I'm like, crap. So I missed my chance on that, but I am, they do get a lot of lease turn-ins there and a lot of, since they work directly with a BMW dealer to get a lot of their stock. So I'm always keeping an eye on there, and I've been trying to see now that I'm working with them again on a more regular basis, trying to see, if they come up with any of the, modern BMWs here over the past few years that I haven't covered. I'm certainly going to jump on them to try and fill those blind spots and those gaps in my content portfolio here as well to try and do that. But yeah, it's something I'm definitely trying to do, as time allows. It just, again, being so maxed out on time does not help with trying to, drive to other people. Cause I've had people that have offered BMWs all over the country as well. And it's just, driving to them too, to get that stuff done. And Ryan says TLX Type S or G70 3.3. It's going to come down to your personal preference as far as what you're looking for. I would say G70 is the better deal. But I will say that TLX Type S, if you don't mind the controller pad on the inside, I like driving the TLX Type S a little bit better. If you like a softer ride, I'd say the G70 has a smoother ride. It has a more luxurious interior than the TLX. But I think basically my perfect car as far as those two goes would be G70 interior with the G70 interior with the TLX Type S's motor, and the transmission between the two of them is a tie. But basically, if you could put the G70 interior in a TLX Type S, I'd be pretty happy as far as everything goes. And if you maybe swapped the ZF8 speed in those vehicles as well, that would make it way better as well. But it's a tough. I'd say really comes down to the deal for those two. If you can get a better deal in one versus the other, then go for whichever one you can get the best deal on. If you are keeping it a long time, I also have to say the Genesis has the 10-year warranty, which certainly will help you there. I also think the G70, it feels a little smaller because it is a little smaller. The TLX is a lot longer for this generation. And I mean, the G70 is also a rear-wheel drive based platform versus the front-wheel drive based thing of the Type S, but they do such a good job with the super handling all-wheel drive that, especially if you're talking about a G70 with all-wheel drive, I think they're going to drive pretty similarly, in my opinion. And I know some people really weren't impressed with the TLX Type S, but for me, I don't know. It felt amazing. I know Acura actually does do some of their R&D driving in the area, and actually, I think it was last year or the year before, someone actually spied, I think, a refreshed TLX running around on the roads where I do my reviews. So maybe it helped that they maybe set up some of the TLX Type S on the actual roads I was reviewing it on, and maybe it just is like the sweet spot as far as my experience. I don't know, but it was, I really love the steering in the TLX Type S. That's the closest I think anyone's gotten to alpha perfection from steering. The Alfa Romeo is the only one that beats it as far as steering goes. I love TLX Type S steering feel. It's so good and so nice and quick and sharp. And Aquamat also says, is the Stinger officially done? I believe so. Yeah, because they had the final edition or whatever, and Stinger is officially. I don't know if production is officially already ended, but it is on its way out if it hasn't. And Copper says, I think Chevy did a nice job with the new Colorado. I think so too. I really think they did a nice job on the styling. They're just kind of pricey. It's one of those ones I wish they even had something a little bit cheaper than they currently have. But I think it's great. I'm hoping to get my hands on one here at some point this year. And Brent says, Matt, my daughter is a Marine and looking to buy a car. I'll thank her for her service. I really appreciate that. And she says she has a $15,000 budget. What we are a car enthusiast family. Any suggestions? So it's gonna come down to what she prefers as far as what she finds fun in a car, and then what that gets narrowed down to whenever you're talking about a $15,000 budget. I mean, off the cuff, I guess it comes down to also her where she lives, as far as if she needs rear-wheel drive, all-wheel drive. If she's okay with something that doesn't have all-wheel drive, then that opens up stuff like, I'd say, a used BRZ, used Miata, things like that are always my top kind of picks. Used Mustangs, Camaros, all those things I think are really great values, and typically depreciate okay, so that you can get a decent one still for 15 grand. So there's all that kind of stuff. Otherwise, if something a little more, I guess, practical and daily drivable, if she wants a manual, I love the last generation of the Civic Si before it went to the turbo. So 2014, I think, was the cutoff for those. If I had 15 grand to spend, that would probably be one of my top things, is getting like one of those really clean SIs from 2014 or maybe a couple years back. I think those are going to be, comfortably under 15 grand too. They're also pretty safe, at least back then. They got top safety ratings, and they're just, nice little cars. And you have that great red line and amazing shifter in those things. It's a very easy manual too, if she's not, if she wants to learn manual, or if she's, getting started out being a manual driver, or if she's a manual pro. That manual is fantastic, but it is a very approachable manual, more so than like the Mustang. Like my Bullet is super tricky to drive with the stick in that. The clutch is real weird with the way it feels and stuff. So, lots of options out there. I'll certainly keep an eye out if you have other follow-up comments. But I also, if you ever want to send me a message, Brent, I always on Facebook, I kind of people give me some more context and we kind of drill down, what might be the best options for them. And I can lay all that out for you as well separately if you'd like. I'd be more than happy to do that. But yeah, and hopefully she can find something she enjoys. It's always fun car shopping, at least in my opinion. I love car shopping. I know some people hate it, and there's all these surveys about how the average person, like one of the things they dread the most is the car dealership. And I can understand the car dealership part of it, but the shopping part is something obviously, that I love, and I'm sure many of you do as well. And Brent says, yeah, okay, those are the suggestions I've been making to her, but she will believe a famous YouTuber. I'm happy to, help you there. But yeah, they're all great cars. There's a lot of good choices too. So, there's no one right answer for most people, unless, again, you're very limited with exactly what you need and where you live and, all that stuff, and you're picky. But if you're not picky, lots of great choices out there. Babs, thank you so much for the super chat. Saying, good morning, Matt. If I'm not mistaken, there's a driving event for the CX-90 next week. When will your video be out? You're right. So there will be a driving event. It's going on here all this week. I will be on one of the later waves here this week for that. And the video, the embargo lifts, I think that's one of the ones. It's either the 3rd or the 4th, whatever that Monday morning is of April. It's back to back. So be prepared for that day, because Ioniq 6, that embargo drops also on that same day, but at 12:01 a.m. So that's going to be a late night upload, especially for East Coasters. If you're on the West Coast, it'll be a nice before bed thing to watch if you want. But then that morning, the actual morning, is when the CX-90 embargo lifts for that one. So that Monday morning is going to be that. So that's a tighter embargo. Typically, I got at least a week or so to edit. That one, I'm gonna be on that trip here at the end of this week, and then I literally am gonna probably have to work through the weekend unless I can get it edited on the plane on the way back, which is a tall order. But yeah, and then but I'm gonna have that video ready to go by Monday morning. So quick turnaround on that one. But by the way, for that trip, we will also be driving both the regular Turbo S, like they'll all be the top trims, but the Turbo S. With the regular, new straight 6 turbo, we're going to have that. And they're also going to have the plug-in hybrid. So it'll be kind of like the Hornet review that I just did, where I'm going to probably do a combo video unless there's too much to cover. I may split it into 2 separate videos, but then that makes it extra hard for the editing. So probably just going to do another combo video, probably a long one again. I apologize, like the Hornet one was, but I'll probably just do it all in one thing and say, here's the pros and cons of the plug-in hybrid and the non, plug-in hybrid, and have that all in one video. So, but yeah, be on the lookout here. That's going to be coming out in basically like a week. So stay tuned for that. And so let me see here. Other questions I'm missing here. Thank you so much also, Bevs, once again, for your super chat. And let me see. So Red Yoshi says, do you think we will see another faster version of the Supra? And there's been rumors of a faster GR Corolla. Any thoughts? Yeah, so Supra, it sounds like the GRMN version is potentially coming. There was rumors I talked about in a weekly update recently where, there's talks that it could potentially even have the motor from the M4 CSL, which that was a best car report. I really doubt that BMW is going to give up that top version of that engine. We may get the regular M3 and M4 motor in the Supra, but that's, I think, as far as it's going to go. And as far as the faster GR Corolla, there is obviously the logical next step is the GRMN version, like they did with the Yaris. And I think, Toyota's really good about doling out new additions for things to keep things fresh. That's one of the things that's really important to them. So, typically when any new Toyota comes out, that's not the last edition of it that you're ever going to see. They're going to do, even if it's just a Nightshade edition or something else, there's always new stuff coming. So, the GR Corolla, I think right now they're just trying to keep up with demand, and that'll probably be the case for the entire life of the car. But, I think you could see maybe in a few years, if everyone's finally got their GR Corollas and they want something to keep it fresh, they do something like that. We will also see, now that Akio Toyota's out and Koji Sato's in for CEO. I mean, he's also a huge motorsports guy, and I'm sure he would love to, make everything fast as well. So I'm not sure if that's going to really change much, but, if he's really feeling pressure to focus on, coming up with new EVs and stuff, then he may divert some of that R&D away from any kind of faster Corolla and instead, put it into, EVs and stuff instead. We'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. But I'd love to see, faster versions of both. I think for the Supra, it's a pretty safe bet. We'll see about the Corolla. Ace of Spades says, hello from St. George, Utah, on spring break with kids, going for a Jeep tour today. That's awesome. Have fun. Hopefully it'll be exciting. And yeah, I don't think I've been to St. George before. I've been to the Salt Lake City area and Park City plenty of times, but that's about it. But that's awesome. Enjoy the spring break, and thanks for joining here for a little bit. I really appreciate that while you're on your spring break there. That's great. And Jeremy, thank you so much for another super chat. He says, "Hi Matt, which new full-size SUV would you recommend to buy right now? Need to tow every once in a while, Tahoe or Sequoia or something else?" So that will come down to, again, your personal preference as far as, do you want the V8? Do you like the twin turbo thing in the Sequoia now? Um, what I can say though is if it were me, again, it will come down to your stuff. And again, feel free to send me a message on Facebook if you want a more personalized recommendation for you. But which one would I recommend buying? I think the Tahoe is still one of the most solid options. They did such a good job with the new Tahoe with giving it that, way bigger third row. They're really maximizing the space with the new independent rear suspension. They drive great. The tech is great. They're really solid. I think Sequoia is also solid if you're okay with the twin turbo thing, but you're not going to save much on gas, if any, on gas. But I mean, that Sequoia, I will say that motor is more exciting to drive than the regular V8 and the Tahoes and stuff. I mean, that thing, the Sequoia is a hot rod. I mean, I was blown away when I did the Sequoia drive last year, just how that thing hauls butt. I mean, and I was driving around these, long straight roads in Texas with, 55-mile-per-hour speed limits or ambiguous speed limits. I mean, you just floor that thing and it pulls for days. I mean, I don't know if they have a top speed limiter on those things, but I mean, that thing's gotta have a high top speed too, because those things just pull like freight trains. And if you do need to tow, I will say that for towing, the Sequoia is going to probably be better too. It's a better experience just because, again, you have that extra power that you don't get in the Tahoe. I mean, you can go for an Expedition, right? And that has the twin turbo thing as well if you want. I don't have any experience really in the Expedition, so I can't give an in-depth analysis on that one. But my neighbor actually has an Expedition and loves it and swears by it. And he's like, keeps saying it's like his favorite car he's ever owned and stuff. So I mean, that's a good choice as well. But if you're just really thinking Tahoe or Sequoia, best towing experience, I'd say Sequoia. Otherwise, though, I'd say probably from a refinement standpoint, the Tahoe could potentially be better as well. I've heard some reports actually of the Sequoia having a little bit more wind noise. It's been a little odd. I need to get into one. They're going to finally be sending me a Sequoia press vehicle. It's been almost a year. They're going to send me one, I think, next month. And it's going to be a TRD version, so it's not going to be the quietest version. But I really want to see and check is the wind noise actually bad in the Sequoia. So maybe stay tuned for my follow-up video on the Sequoia next month if you're not in a hurry. Yeah, I would lean towards Tahoe otherwise, though, because I think the Tahoe has slightly better packaging. You have so much more interior space in the Tahoe. So if you ever use the third row, it's better in the Tahoe. The second row is better than it is in the Sequoia. Sequoia doesn't even have much headroom. Then so I like the packaging of the Tahoe better, but I like the motor in the Sequoia better. So it's always give and take with any of this stuff, but hopefully that helps you a little bit there. And again, feel free to send me a Facebook message if you want to talk more about that as well. I'll be more than happy to. Getting back to the other questions here from members. So Omar says 1998 Nissan 240SX for 19 grand and 97,000 miles is the closest thing to a Skyline GTR styling wise. Is it a good deal? I'd have to look at it to see, if it's rusty, how it's been maintained. There's a lot of things. It's kind of hard to say. And I also don't stay up on the 240SX market, so I have no clue what a good price is for one of those anymore. But if you want a Skyline GTR, I mean, I have no clue. R32 GTRs are still way more expensive than they probably should be. And I think you can get R33s now, right? I think that's part of it because we're getting close. The R34 is finally becoming legal here. So I think, R32, R33, if you want something that's an actual real Skyline GTR, I don't know. Again, they're probably way more expensive. But if you can find one that's rough around the edges or a Skyline, GTS instead of the GTR or something like that, put a body kit on it or something, could be fun too. I loved the R32 that I drove a few years back. If you watched that video, that thing was so sweet. That was so exciting. And the JDM fan of me really still wants a GTR someday of any sort. Would be great. But yeah, I don't know about the 240SX market though, unfortunately. Sorry, Omar. Ryan also says, thank you. Asking for a friend who is struggling between those two as far as TLX and G70 we were talking about earlier. So the deal breaker for me is the TLX is no true manual control. There is no Type S for test drives. Yeah, that's tough. You're right about not having the true manual control. The thing is, though, the G70, the manual, if you're looking for that manual control, it's not the best in the G70 either. I mean, that transmission will, I think hold years and stuff, but it's still not as snappy. Neither of those transmissions are even close to the top of their pack in that segment. But if your friend is struggling, if he does want a good manual experience, I mean, we know the ZF8 speed in the 3 Series, even though I haven't driven that 3 Series generation, an M340i is probably, if you can get a good deal on one of those, that's going to be the way to go for manual control, because you can't beat the ZF8 speed. It's just going to be the best. S4 could be good too. It's been a long time since I've driven an S4. So, and I don't think I've actually even covered one of this generation, because Audi started sending me press vehicles after that had gone through the fleets. And I don't think they had any in there since. So, yeah, can't really weigh in on the S4 either, but 340i is probably going to be great, and everyone seems to love them. So that would be a hard consideration if you're looking for good manual control. And thanks for chiming in, Ryan, there about the 240SX. And it's so great to hear some other people here that are knowledgeable about them to fill my void of information here. And he says it's worth it. So there you go. Thanks for chiming in, Ryan. I appreciate that. All right. So let me see here. Brent also loves car shopping. And Linda says, hold on, I jumped here. Okay, I barely put 3,000 miles on my 2017 Mustang EcoBoost. If I can find a 2023 Prius to buy, then I'll sell my Mustang. Hopefully I won't have a problem with it. Is any brand of gas better for it? For the EcoBoost, I think the main thing is to make sure you're getting top tier gas. When you can Google top tier companies as far as which ones offer top tier gas. That's just, an extra certification that's done to make sure that you're getting, high quality stuff. But as long as it's one of those brands, I don't think there's any brand that's necessarily better. They all have their unique things as far as, Techron in them, or, the different things that they offer. And I did have a partnership with Shell for many years, and I still I'm hoping to work again with them here this year. And so Shell V-Power Nitro is one of the ones that I've, talked about over the years, and that has a lot of improvements as well with extra lubrication. And it could be a placebo effect. I don't know, but I will say in the Bullet, when I run Shell, and I know it's a V8, so it's not, the same as your EcoBoost, but whenever I feel like the Bullet likes Shell a little bit better, it seems to be a little bit smoother with like the idle, and just, I don't know, just for some reason, it just feels smoother whenever I have that in there versus BP or something else. Again, I'm not getting paid to say that, at least not currently, but that's, I just actually, I felt that genuinely. And it was actually nice. There used to be a Shell station pretty close to me. It's currently been under construction for a little while. I don't know what they're doing with it, but Shell is always my favorite. But and not just because they, had a partnership with me. I used to always go for, Pennzoil products in the past, and Shell, whenever I could. And, but, I think they're mostly probably the same again. As long as you get the top tier thing, they should all be, pretty similar as far as carbon buildup and all that kind of stuff goes. But I think some of those, ones that have those additives certainly kind of help keep that stuff to a minimum a little bit more. But again, I'm no engineer, so I can't give you a real good answer on that, unfortunately. Yeah, and I'm going to be driving the new Prius Prime here this coming week as well, Linda. So stay tuned for that review that's going to be coming out here, not this coming week here, but the following week. So I know you're considering the Prime, so I'll have some coverage on that here soon. Ryan says it's not a GTR, but a well-maintained manual 240SX is rare. Yeah, the 240SX is great. I loved, I reviewed one many years ago that was really close to stock, and it was fun. It was not fast, but it was fun. It's one of those cars, you have to enjoy wringing it out and stuff in order to have fun with it. And if that annoys you, then it's not going to be a car for you. But if you don't mind the low power, then it's a great choice. So let me see. I see Omar is asking his question a bunch of times, so I'll answer it here. He says, when are you going to drive the 2023 Toyota Grand Highlander or the 2023 Honda Pilot? Pilot is, I'm going to be getting one as a press vehicle here next month. And then I will be driving the Grand Highlander. I don't know if that's been announced yet. I'm going to be driving it soon. I'll be driving the Pilot first, so I'll have the Pilot as a reference, which will be good for whenever I do the Grand Highlander. But it's going to be in May, I can say, for the drive. So That is all I'll say on that for now. But so by the well, actually, I don't even know when the embargo is for Grand Highlander anyway. I just know when I'm driving it. But yeah, so I would say before summer hits, hopefully you'll have information on both of those, Omar. I know you've been very curious about the Pilot and the Grand Highlander, so I will have all that info for you here before the summer, and I will be sure to compare them in the video and all that. And all right, other questions here. JK says, blame the YouTubers for inflating the 240 market, Greg. Okay, yeah, I guess there's some inflation there going on. And it's also, I'm sure there's plenty of YouTubers that are building them and stuff, and that doesn't help. But it's also another one of those vehicles where everyone wants to mod them because they're cheap to mod and there's plenty of parts. Same thing with the Miatas, try and find a clean NA Miata. It's like, good luck. These days they've all been gone through and sent to hell and back for most of them, so it's tough. So finding a nice one is going to inflate the market on that kind of stuff, just because they've been, run through by everyone else. And Trucking Car Guys is the drifters as well. And yeah, they're all probably, mostly trashed by now. And also Aquaman's asking how the Bullet's doing. It's doing great. I will be doing my 5-year follow-up video here in July, but been doing well so far. I still have to take it in for a recall for like the blind spot monitoring or something. And then, it's going to need an oil change here in April. So I'll be doing my yearly oil change, but I don't drive it very often. So it's always like I put 2,000 miles on it on each oil change or whatever. So that's why I wait a year. But yeah, Bullet's doing great. I'm happy. I haven't had any press vehicles the past few weeks. I've actually been able to drive the Bullet like a daily driver, which is a wild idea for me, but it's actually something I've been able to do, which is nice. So it's always great to drive that thing. And let me see here. Other questions. So Eric says, hello, friend. People are pushing manufacturers now to save the combustion engines. Yeah, I think, well, there's certainly, a lot of people that didn't ever want to see it go. And it's, we'll see how the EU thing, if you've been, watching the weekly updates, how that plays out. I haven't heard any updates on that yet, but I thought they were going to try and get something done this week as far as making a decision on that over in the EU. But, that's one thing to keep in mind. It's a whole thing I can get into, but that's one thing to keep in mind is if even the EU can't agree on these bans for 2035, and I mean, I feel like Europe does everything, way earlier than we do. And it's like, we're always way behind them as far as progressing on things. So I think if that's, if 2035 is even a hard target for them to hit, then don't worry about all these other mandates. Like California has the 2035 thing, but I think I was talking to someone about this recently, another journalist, how like the 2035 mandate has no teeth. Like there's no fines if companies go beyond the percentage and they're not 100% EV by 2035 in California. I don't think there's any fines currently set up. There's no punishments in place for not hitting that target. So these things currently are still just these like dreams of like, this is what we'd like to do. And maybe it's some, political pandering and stuff as well. But, we will see how these things actually turn into reality, if they do turn into reality over, the next decade or so. And again, this stuff is still, a long ways off, even if it does happen in 2035, which I'm still very skeptical of if we're actually gonna hit those targets. But even if it does, we're still talking 12 years away here. I mean, it's like 12 years ago, like we were on, was like the iPhone 3G or something. I mean, look at how things have changed so much between, then and now, and, how things have, just radically transformed over the past 12 years. 12 years ago, we had no such thing as Hellcats. We had no such thing as, 5-liter Mustang. Mustang still had 300 horsepower for the V8 12 years ago. And now look where we're at. Things change so much in, every part of life. And so 12 years is a long time away. And that goes both ways. 12 years from now, the grid could be great. 12 years from now, it could be terrible. We have no clue, but it's just too far away to say. That's why I'm not clutching my pearls just yet for any of this stuff. It's got lots of time for, these deadlines to be pushed back or things to change or some technological breakthrough to happen. Lots of potential, things. So that's why I just live in the now. We got a lot of great stuff now, and it's we'll just have to wait and see for everything else. And Bruce says, how do you pick news to cover for the weekly updates? I'm pretty unpicky, honestly. I just basically cover the new stuff that comes out every week. I'm pretty selective about the fact that I don't cover like stuff that's put out by tuners or stuff that's anything that's like recalls, like those types of things I don't really cover, because I just for me, it's about here's all the exciting new cars that came out this week. And that's one of the things, some people complain about the weekly updates, like, oh, like I'm tired of hearing about all this electric stuff. And it's like, I cover what's new every week. If everyone came out with a new V12 sports car every week, then great. I'd talk about V12 sports cars every single week, but that's not what's out there. I got to cover what new things are out there. And so it's just whatever's in the news cycle this week. If someone came out with a new car, I talk about it, and it's that simple, honestly. Now there are some things, if they're so minor, if there's an extra cup holder added to some car, or it gets new USB-C jacks or something, I'm not going to cover that kind of stuff. But as far as, notable things, I usually cover. Now, there are sometimes, like if it's an auto show week where there are a ton of things to cover and I don't want the video to be an hour long, where I will make some cuts, or there'll be some things that I'm like, okay, this isn't urgent to cover this week. I can cover this next week, or I just not cover it at all. If it's, something that I think no one's going to be upset for me not covering, then, I can, cut some stuff there. But mostly it's just, whatever's new, I cover. And Dorian says, do you have an opinion on the Mazda 3 hatchback with the manual gearbox versus the huge all-wheel drive turbo? Second car to my Porsche 718T, it has a manual gearbox as well. So I think it depends on how much you want the manual, because and how much you want the extra power and the all-wheel drive stuff. If you're just looking for a little daily driver, especially going to get better fuel economy with the regular Mazda 3, I think that motor's pretty punchy with a naturally aspirated motor, and that with the manual. Again, I only had a quick drive in one of those, their unicorns. I do have someone who has offered me a lightly modified Mazda 3 hatch manual that I'm hoping, fingers crossed, I have time to make the trip and go review that this year. And hopefully get some more time with one of those. But in the meantime, it's really going to come down to how badly you want the all-wheel drive and the turbo. Otherwise, save yourself the money and totally go for the manual. You like the manual anyway, I would probably just stick to that, to be on the safe side. But again, it's worth test driving both if you can. I know the manual is probably a unicorn, so that you don't really need that much of a test drive in, because the thing is, the rev hang, I don't remember it being bad. It should be fine to drive, so I don't think there's really too much mystery about the Mazda 3 manual. So it's really, try and test drive one of those all-wheel drive turbo ones with the auto, see if you can live with it. If not, then just go for the manual. It'd kind of be the way I'd go about it. Hopefully that helps you. Both are great though, and so I don't think there's really any wrong answer, but you might enjoy one better than the other. All right, other questions here. So Omar's also asking, is there going to be a GR Grand Highlander coming soon? Probably not, at least not here in the States. I don't think we're going to get anything like that. Ryan says, a base 2014 Cayman and a Miata RF Club are the same price. Maintenance not being a consideration, which would you get? I can't readily get a base Cayman to test drive to compare where I live. If maintenance is not a consideration, that's a big, important caveat. I would say the Cayman's probably the better driving experience. Obviously, you have the 6-cylinder. And it's also it's a Porsche. They do a really good job. The Miata has lower limits, and they engineered in those lower limits to make it more fun at lower speeds. So if you are doing primarily lower speed driving, you still want to have fun, the Cayman might be a little more boring whenever you're at lower speeds. If you're not able to really push it, as much, then I think the Miata could be fun if you can't exploit, higher speeds all the time. But it's not like the Cayman's a hot rod. I mean, especially the base one, it's quicker than a Miata, but not wildly so. It's not like we're talking about Shelby's or anything. So, I'd say, and also it doesn't hurt, even if you can't test drive a Cayman at a dealer. I'm not sure, how much you are online as far as, if you want to join like a Cayman owners club or a Cayman Facebook group. A lot of people in those kinds of groups, they'll let you, if not at least drive it, they'll at least take you for a ride, meet up with someone at a Cars and Coffee and, go for a ride in someone's base Cayman and just get a flavor for it, just to see. Even if you're just riding shotgun, it'll give you a decent idea of, okay, what are these cars' capabilities? Do you like the sound? Do you like the low seating position? Do you like the way it drives? And the owner can really give you some insight as well, even if they're unwilling to let you drive it. But a lot of people are actually really nice, and they'll let you take it for a little quick spin. It's worth investigating that if you're really seriously considering between the two. But I would say, again, if you don't care about maintenance, Cayman's probably going to be the more fun choice. And Omar says, does the Bullet come with wireless Apple CarPlay on all trims? No, Bullet was before wireless CarPlay was a thing with Ford. So it has the Sync 3 screen. None of those have the wireless CarPlay. So I have wired in CarPlay. And, in my reviews, I talk about how I really like having the wireless thing. And that is certainly true. In the Bullet, though, the only thing is I can't do the voice texting is the only like pain with that. But I really don't actually listen to music very often in the Bullet. I'm just listening to the exhaust the whole time. I'm one of those people that just like drives around in silence, but I'm just hearing the exhaust all the time. So in the Bullet, it's less of an issue to not have the wireless CarPlay because, and obviously I have Bluetooth audio streaming, which works the same as CarPlay as far as music goes. It would be nice to be able to answer texts in the Bullet, with my phone in my pocket, but and I have considered you can get those like $100 adapters you plug into the USB jack and turn any car that has wired CarPlay into wireless basically. I've considered doing one of those, but again, I don't drive the Bullet enough to really make it worthwhile, honestly. And so for those few rare instances where I'm just doing a short drive and I don't feel like plugging my phone in to do the voice, texting, it's not a big deal. And if I am going to be doing a lot of texting, then I'm going to just plug it in and throw it into the armrest there and then have the CarPlay and just do it that way. So it's something I can work around for sure. So let me see. So Bruce says, which 2023 car design will not age well over time? It's a good question. I would say most of the BMW stuff, but I could be wrong. Other than that, other stuff though, there's nothing that jumps out into my mind aside from the BMWs. Everything else, I think one thing that I'm already seeing not aging super well is the Mercedes EQS stuff, all the jelly beans that they're coming out with. I think, I don't know, like it doesn't seem super distinctive and just doesn't seem, I don't know. I just feel like, and I was talking to actually, I think it was Roman that I was talking to about this recently. Roman from the Fastlane Car. There was a bunch of us on the Ioniq 6 event last week. We all got to hang out and have dinner together and chat and stuff. I think he even said, like, when the Taycan first came out, it was like, whoa, this is futuristic. This is really cool. And this made a statement. EQS, is it making that kind of a statement? I don't think it is. I think Porsche nailed it. And, maybe the Porsche will age poorly because it's more radical now. I don't know, but just the EQSs seem to be not, doing, they're not quite as impressive as I think people need them to be for $100,000 car. But that's just, again, car design's personal preference, but that's just my idea. That's a good question though, Bruce. I wish I had a better answer for you. I just said I'd have to take time to think about, some other vehicles. And Trucking Car Guy says he doesn't think the Model 3 would age well either. Yeah, I don't think the Model 3 ever looked good, honestly. I don't think it ever, I don't know. I think it's actually fairly conservative with the back end. So I think the back end could age well because there's not a whole lot there styling-wise. But as far as the front goes, I don't know. Yeah, it hasn't gotten any better, certainly over the years. But I never thought it looked good from the get-go. Clearly hasn't hurt sales though, and just goes to show a lot of people, same thing with the BMWs. A lot of people either have different styling preferences than most of us, or it's just not a big deal for people. Yeah, Greg says Model Y is another one. Yeah, I don't, again, I never liked the styling to begin with, but I guess again, it doesn't hurt sales, so there's something there to be said that they're doing something right with the styling because it's not driving people away. WX guy, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, do you see Canoo being a player in the EV world? If they can get their finances figured out, but it sounds like they've been kind of rocky recently from, I think I remember seeing a headline. I haven't really dug into them too much. I like their designs. I think they have promise. But it's just one of those ones. There's going to be so many of these EV, startups that just kind of fall by the wayside. We'll see if Canoo has that fate or if they actually can rise above. It's tough out there. I think a lot of these startups are realizing this is a lot harder than, tech. It's a lot harder to put a car together. And especially the networks that are needed as far as dealer networks and service networks and support and all that stuff. It's a lot. And I think especially when you have the resources that the legacy car companies do, they're catching up so fast anyway that it's like, maybe Canoo had a chance if they would have been, trying to do stuff back in the early days of Tesla. But now it's like, it's an uphill battle. And I don't think you're going to see very many of those startups even stick around. Even Lucid's struggling a little bit, and they are one of the more stable ones in my opinion. And so I don't know. I'd like to see Canoo do better. I never want to see any car company fail. I think they all have cool ideas, and the more choices out there, the better. But it's just one of those things. It's it's kind of tough for some of these companies to do all those things. It takes so much upfront capital, and if you don't have that already built in, like these legacy companies do, then it's almost impossible, I think, to break through. And see, Marco was able to make it, so thanks for joining, Marco, and for being a member as well. I really appreciate it. And Adam says, yeah, BMW girls for sure. Every time I see a Model 3, it reminds me of the Radiator Springs racer cars at Disneyland. That's true. Yeah, they do resemble that for sure. That's funny. Yeah, I think it also doesn't help the Model 3 that they're everywhere. Getting back to what we were talking about earlier about, vehicles being common, like the AMGs and the M's being more common now, it certainly diminishes the appeal. And I think it's kind of the same with the Model 3. It's just like, imagine having a white or a silver or gray Model 3 and just being in a parking lot trying to find your car. And actually, I think I saw a story just like a week or two ago where somehow, I don't know how this happened, but like someone was able to get into what they thought was their Tesla, but it was an identical Tesla to theirs, but was not their car. But they hopped in and somehow were able to drive it away before they realized it wasn't their car. I don't know how that worked with the key and stuff, but it's like, if you're getting into a car and it's the identical car and you don't realize that you're in your wrong car until down the road, like, we need some more uniqueness in cars. Like, just like, come on. I don't know, just way too much copy and pasting with everyone's purchasing decisions these days. All right. Marco also, or Trunk Car Guy says Model S is aged better than the others. Yeah, Model S is, I think, aged very well. And I think that is a car that always looked good, in my opinion. And I think they did some nice tweaks there to keep it fresh. But I think Model S has aged very well for sure. And it's also it's aged well as far as the tech for the most part, and also the comfort and stuff. It's still like a really nice car to just cruise around in. And Marco says, the way I see electric cars aging is the same way I see phone technology aging. There's certainly going to be some of that, I think, where they get older faster and outdated and stuff. And especially the more that we're dependent on software, how long can you move the ball forward on software before you start having to phase out stuff? And then you got stuff that's on dated software. And then, I don't know. That'll be a real big, interesting thing to see how these things age. I don't think they're going to age well with these screens and all that. And as far as how that works, and I know that's one thing I was talking about several weeks back now with Bugatti, how they're saying the next Chiron successor won't have any kind of crazy screens. And this is why the Chiron doesn't have any touchscreen or anything. They have a tiny little screen, in the gauge cluster, but that's it. But they said, like, these Bugattis have to work in 50 years whenever they're on, the Pebble Beach concourse and all this stuff. Like, you got to have them work. And so also it helps that, it's not like a Bugatti owner needs to have the latest tech. They have their, S-Class or whatever for the daily driver anyway. But, if these big companies are saying this kind of stuff, they're skeptical about how this stuff's going to last down the road, then and this is honestly even, I think it's a good idea to lease EVs more so than buy them. This is why, we did our Ford options plan on the Mach-E where it's basically a lease, but you get the tax credit. Because, I think we don't know still, aside from the goofy market with the prices and stuff currently, like, we don't know how these EVs are going to depreciate. We know historically EVs have dropped really fast. That's also because those batteries degraded a lot faster in some of those vehicles, like the air-cooled, Nissan Leafs and stuff. And so we don't know, like, these new EVs, there's talks that could potentially hold their value better. And maybe if they're just the hot new thing, maybe that'll help. But I'm also like, is it going to be something where the screens work in 10 years? I don't know. I don't think it's worth buying any kind of EV for a long-term purpose because you just don't know yet. You'd like to think that it would all be solid, but you just don't know. So I think that's why it makes the most sense to kind of do a lease on something like that or a short-term purchase and make sure that you get out of it, pretty quickly. I don't think holding any of that kind of stuff super long or honestly, even any modern cars, not even just EVs, because you have these huge screens and everything these days. And who knows if that stuff's all going to work just as well in 10 years. So, it's unfortunate. I know a lot of people like to buy a car and keep it forever. But, I think as technology progresses, either go for a Tacoma or something like that, which is kind of future-proofed, or you just, go for something and just try and, have a shorter purchasing, or ownership experience, I guess, and, make sure you get out of stuff before it gets to be super ancient. And Dorian says, I have not seen a recent Tesla that does not look like a suppository. Yeah. But again, it hasn't hurt sales. So what you and I like styling wise clearly is not what many of the masses out there care about. So they sell enough of them that clearly they are the ones that are, in the right and we're in the wrong as far as styling goes. I can't understand it, can't wrap my head around it, but people buy them. Sean, thank you so much for gifting a membership. If there's anyone out there who wants to grab that still, that is out there. Thank you so much for doing that, Sean. I really appreciate it. Getting back here, we have Adam says, Canoe is burning through 300 to 400 million per quarter, quickly running out of cash. Even commencing production won't get them cash flow positive for several years. Sad, but they'll probably disappear. Well, thanks, Adam, for the better answer than I was able to give there. And yeah, these burn rates, I don't know how any of these tech companies can sustain any kind of burn rate with it making any kind of sense. I was honestly skeptical with Tesla for a while because of their, them just burning through cash. And thankfully they've, turned it around seriously and they're massively profitable. But yeah, it takes someone with a better financial mind than myself to figure out, the break-even point there of, how much you can burn before you're just, going off the edge of a cliff. But, yeah, it's unfortunate about Canoe. Maybe they can, be sold to someone. I think that's another really good way for some of these startups to survive is some of these companies that are lagging, like Toyota, like Honda. I know Honda's got the partnership with GM, and that makes sense for them. But Toyota, if they're, really feeling like they're behind the ball, like Toyota should buy Lucid and, repurpose and make cheaper stuff, but use that tech. And then boom, you just got a huge level up on your current process and kind of shortcutting the whole thing there. And I think that could happen for a lot of these companies. If some of these companies are struggling, if Subaru is struggling, they want to do something on their own, they want to do it before 2027, buy Canoe. And, it's the skateboard platform. So ditch the whole, crazy styling if you want. Take the platform, chuck it under an Outback and call it a day. I feel like there's some shortcuts here. And again, I'm not a professional with this kind of stuff. I have no clue as far as, behind the scenes if this stuff makes any sense or I'm just talking complete crap. But I don't know. If these companies, the Subaru will not have an actual EV on their own, aside from the Toyota stuff, until 2027, I think is when their factory is going to be up and running. Do they want to go the next 4 years with nothing? Or do you want to shortcut it and, latch on to one of these other companies and do something like that? I don't know. To me, it just makes sense to, capitalize on some of these startups and the advancements that they've made and then roll that into the legacy, funding and legacy infrastructure and all that. And you kind of have the best of both worlds in some ways. I'm surprised there aren't more of these teamings up happening. Maybe it's too early. Maybe in a few years we'll see some of these, startup companies, looking for a lifeboat and they just cling on to some company and you have this big buyout of a bunch of different startups. I don't know. We'll have to see. But I think some of them too, if they know that they're not the best ones out there, then everyone else is happy to let them just die off as well. So it's very interesting. It's so fascinating. This is a time we've never seen before with the way there's new companies and the way there's new options and stuff coming and going and this massive transformation, this massive investment. And we've never seen it ever in the history of the automobile. And it's really fascinating that we're all getting to witness this in real time. We'll see what stuff crashes and burns, what technologies rise to the top, which companies rise to the top. It's really a giant reshuffling and it's wild. So let me see. Bruce says the Porsche 911 Dakar and the Lamborghini Huracan Storado are examples of safari cars. Do you see any other sports cars getting safari editions? Not off the top of my head. I think those are the two, well, especially the Lamborghini is one of the ones that makes sense. I could certainly see if Subaru wanted to be crazier, since they've already gone with the cladding on the side of the WRX. You might as well just go full crazy with the WRX and just make a lifted safari version of the WRX. If you're going to go for this pseudo SUV thing anyway with the WRX now, then just go the whole crazy and just, do everything and just go nuts. And so I think Safari WRX is a prime candidate. Other than that, though, I can't see anyone else really justifying it off the top of my head. I'd have to sit down and think about it a little bit more, but I really don't think it's anyone else that would go for that. Quite like Porsche can get away with it and Lamborghini just being crazy, Lamborghini. Sean, thank you so much for being a member for 8 months. And I appreciate the support here. He says, my Kia is burning 1 quart of oil every 1,000 miles. Kia claims this is normal. Also to change it at 7,500 miles. Guess I'll get rid of it when the warranty runs out. That's unfortunate to hear. That is definitely not normal. I mean, it's normal if it's like a GT350, but even in that, I feel like it's unacceptable. But Ford was saying the same thing with that because they're like, oh, it's a high-strung race motor. Clearly, that's not the case with the Kia. I'm not sure which Kia you have and what motor it is, but I've heard some of them do consume oil. It's one of those things. It's so weird how, you hear a lot of good reports from people, and then also some horror stories from other people. And that goes for most brands, but I know Kia has had some of that. And I know some people have even said that like Kia and Hyundai and some of those haven't been even honoring their warranties as much. So there's certainly, some stuff that needs to, be investigated there as far as how widespread those things are, and if something needs to be, brought to the forefront and, something made to happen there. And that's, the beauty of one of the unfortunate beauties of class action lawsuits and, recalls and the NHTSA and things like that is, that's the thing. I think it's the NHTSA where you can report safety issues and problematic things on vehicles, and that gets sent to the proper authorities that look into that stuff. And if they get enough of those complaints, then that's something that does get brought to the surface. And I know even with the Mach-E community, that was something whenever some of the Mach-Es were leaving people stranded, there was enough people that sent complaints to the NHTSA that they actually did an investigation into, like, is there a common problem with the Mach-Es with their high voltage junction box or whatever it is that made it so that they were failing at a higher rate than was acceptable. And so, there's things like that. So, I'm sure I've heard about the, Kias and Hyundais having an oil burn issue, but then there's a lot of people I hear that don't have issues. So, yeah, and another thing I will say too, I'm not sure, if Kia corporate has been telling you that, or if the dealer has been telling you about the burning oil thing, but if you have a bad dealership experience, I know it's not convenient and feasible for most people, but if you can try and find another dealer, from a different dealer network or a different dealer group to look at it and maybe give you a second opinion on something, and, maybe get a better experience somewhere else. But if it's coming down from corporate, then I guess your hands are kind of tied there. But hopefully you can get some kind of resolution there. But certainly, yeah, don't keep it beyond the warranty. If it's doing that and no one's going to help you out with that, yeah, I mean, and especially that's just unfortunate to even have to deal with even with a warranty. So, I mean, I would try and go for something else. Or, if you love the car to death, try and find another one that has a better, check the Carfaxes for other ones and see if there's any of them that, have a better bill of health and, better maintenance history. And maybe you can get something that, is a solid, version of that Kia that you have, but doesn't have the issues that yours has. That's unfortunate to hear, though. I'm sorry to hear about that. And hopefully they get that, sorted out. He says, in reference to my last super chat, what 2020 to 2022 models do you think I'll be looking at in the used market in around 27? Interested to see what holds up. Now that's hard to say. I mean, as far as, what holds up, it's always the safest bets for me. If you're looking for something that's going to last a long time, Toyota's really tough to beat. Honda's still pretty solid too, from everything I've seen. Again, I'm no expert on reliability, just from the things that I've seen anecdotally and consumer reports and various other things that I've seen and heard. Toyota's tough to beat. Mazda's really top notch too. I think if you want, especially, Mazda has pretty proven tech as far as the engines and the transmissions. That's all old stuff for the most part, and that works in your advantage. Same thing with the Toyota. So if you want something reliable, I'd say Toyota, Mazda, potentially Honda, but they're kind of a third place in my mind. And then, there's some others, but really I think those are still the top three. Though they've been, especially Toyota has always been kind of one of the top ones for reliability, and Toyota knows that, and they engineer their cars with that expectation in mind. They know consumers are going to expect that out of them, and they, plan for that accordingly. And that's kind of why, Toyota does some things that they do and doesn't do some other things that some others do, for those reasons. And so I would say if you want something, super reliable without any issues, chances are I'd say go for a Toyota or a Mazda right now currently. So let me see. We got a bunch of other member questions here. I'll make sure I don't want to miss. And so getting back to the trucking car guy says, honestly, a lot of people think of EVs as accessories, much like modern cell phones, and they drop at the slightest sign of trouble. Yeah, definitely true. And especially now, there's less maintenance. There's less you have to put into an EV compared to a gas vehicle. There's, going to be a lower tolerance, I think, over time of people being like, oh, I don't want to replace the tires. I don't want to, because they haven't done anything. They haven't done oil changes. They haven't done any kind of fluid or belt changes. You never have to do that kind of stuff. So it's really going to be a little more, I guess, a little less forgiving as far as that stuff. Potentially, there might be some other people that say, well, I haven't done oil changes, belts, things like that, so I don't mind, doing tires or swapping screens or whatever the case might be. We'll have to wait and see how that ages. But I think for a lot of people, it's just, and especially these days with how expensive most of these EVs are, very few people that are in the $50,000 shopping bracket are not, very few of those people keep those cars forever. And if they do, they're going to go buy a Lexus or something like that, again, because they buy something Toyota based that's going to last them forever. And so, you look at, that's the one thing, like when I talk about how the German vehicles don't hold up beyond the lease period, but they don't need to hold up beyond the lease period because guess what? Anyone who's a new shopper, they never keep their Mercedes or their BMW or Audi over 3 years anyway. It's either a lease vehicle, for the company, it's a write-off or whatever, or they're, well off enough that they're going to buy their new Mercedes and they're going to buy another one in another year or 2 or 3 or whatever. And they're not needing anyone who's got a 5-year-old Mercedes, I'd say the large percentage of those people are second or third owners if you have an older Mercedes. And, the people who do love them enough, then those people are probably willing to do that extra maintenance and keep them around, So anyway, a little bit of a tangent there. But anyway, getting back to some other questions here. So Marco says, I was just about to say the leasing option works well for electric and new cars. Unfortunately, cars just don't last anymore unless you get Toyota Lexus. So we're all on the same page. Sorry, I'm behind on the comments here a little bit. And Jay says, will you ever get a chance to review Lucid Air or the Rivian? Rivian, I don't know. I don't know how they distribute press vehicles, honestly. As far as the Lucid, there is a Lucid Air currently in my fleet. I get the same fleet stuff that Sophion from Redline Reviews gets. So he just had the Lucid. And I was talking to Sophion last week about it. And he's like, are you going to ask for it? And I'm like, I don't think so. Because it seems like, at least on the channel here, at least as far as mass appeal goes, very few of you are interested in watching reviews on 6-figure electric vehicles. The Audi RS e-tron GT is a prime example. That video's got like 7,000 views. It was a complete waste of time. I love driving it, and I wanted to drive it myself just because I selfishly wanted to spend a week with that car. But from a channel standpoint, it was a complete waste of time because no one watched it. So Lucid Air is going to be even more niche, I think, than the Audi is. So a Lucid would probably get no views, so I'm probably not going to touch the Lucid. I personally am curious to drive it. I would like to spend a week with $150,000, insane electric vehicle. It'd be tons of fun, but I'm doing this as my job, not as, me just joyriding. So I need to do stuff that makes sense. So I will probably not cover the Lucid because no one's going to watch it on my channel. So that's just the reality. And I totally get it. I built this channel on affordable performance vehicles. And so the Lucid Air is the polar opposite of that, in a lot of ways. So I totally understand and don't blame anyone for not wanting to watch that. And Marco says the burn rate in these banks are starting to feel the pressure, especially Silicon Valley banks as of late, is just going to end up failing spectacularly. Yeah, the whole thing's going to kind of implode. And it kind of also, kind of goes back to like the recession stuff from 2008 and stuff, but it also kind of, this is like cocaine fueled thing we had in the 80s and stuff too, with all these, tech things. You had the tech bubble, in the late 90s, early 2000s. These themes of, this startup greed and, just these high, these quick rises and just as quick drop offs and collapses. It's just this story. It's like as old as time, it just keeps happening over and over again. And so, yeah, I personally wasn't that shocked to see all that stuff with the Silicon Valley stuff. The whole Silicon Valley thing is going to probably implode for the most part. And especially now there's more regulation pressure on, all these big tech companies. That's going to come to hammer even the large players, more so. And so we'll see how all that plays out. It's very interesting times we're living in here. So let me see. Adam says the only EV worth buying and keeping is the Mazda MX-30, if only because it's so subjectively awful that a rich collector who also owns a Yugo and an Edsel will want to buy it from you in 20 years. And they're rare too, so there's that as well going for them. But yeah, that's very true. The MX-30. Another one I haven't touched. I think, they don't even sell them here in, the East Coast, so it wouldn't make any sense for, to review it. But I think there was a chance at some point I could have potentially driven one, but there's another one I'm like, no one's. And actually, I got invited on the launch for the MX-30, but it was just another one. I'm like, no one's going to watch this. It'd be cool to try, but no one's going to watch this, unfortunately. I commend Mazda for trying with that car, but it just seems dead on arrival. And MDTT's chiming in about the oil changes there. Yeah, 5K maximum he's suggesting on the oil there for the Kia. Yeah, I mean, it will come down to different cars have different recommendations and stuff. Some you can get away with stuff longer than others. But maybe you have some more insight on those MD than I do. So yeah. It's usually, I say go by whatever the owner's manual says, whatever the recommended maintenance is. But I know sometimes that is also written for, either warranty claims or written just, because it's whatever they're expected to write in there, it can sometimes vary. And yeah. Anyway, Bruce says, you always pronounce Porsche. I do, because that's the correct pronunciation according to Porsche. So that's how I always say it. I know some people say Porsche, and I used to say Porsche a while back, but now, especially being online and having every single word that I say, being checked and corrected if I do anything wrong, I got to make sure I always do everything correctly. So I always say Porsche. Yeah. Marco says I can somewhat get away with the 7,500 mile oil change. That's because 95% of the miles are highway. Yeah. So, some can go 10,000 miles even on oil. It just depends on. I know the Mercedes, that was their recommendation, was every year or every 10,000 miles, and maybe that's horrible for them, but that's what they recommend, and that's what the maintenance plans call for. And so, you stick to that, and your warranty should hold up. And Dorian says there's nothing I can find under 32 grand plus tax that maintain Honda has 200,000 miles left. Yeah, Hondas are usually pretty solid. I know I actually just even saw a few months back, there was someone who's a courier, like a medical courier. Those people rack up insane miles. And someone had it was a new Honda Touring, a Honda Civic Touring. It was like a 2022, new generation, has the, turbo motor. And I think it had like already 250,000 miles on it or something. And the Carfax looked great aside from just regular oil changes every, probably every other 3 days the way they were driving. But they were just burning through it, and it was fine. And I think it really comes down to not even mileage so much as age for a lot of these cars. If you see, there's some cars that are super unreliable that have been driven 30,000 miles over the past 30 years, but it's just they didn't get driven enough. And so I think some of the stuff, they can go those high miles if they're pretty new and fresh. They just about anything can provide huge miles these days, especially with how much more reliable cars are these days. So anyway, I'm going to get back to all the member questions, but I see WX. I keep catching myself. I keep wanting to say WX guy. WX guy, thank you so much for another super chat here. He said, I have a weird issue where I get dizzy / lightheaded anytime I drive a vehicle made after about 2015. Do you know what the possible cause could be? You know an engineer that might be able to help me? Jason Fensky, the Engineering Explained channel, you might want to try reaching out to him. He's not an automotive engineer, but he does understand engineering stuff. I've never heard that before. After about 2015, I don't know if it's maybe, if there's some kind of like Bluetooth thing that's maybe messing with you. I know nothing about medical stuff as far as what could be causing that, so I can't really weigh in. I'm sorry you're having that. That's really unfortunate though. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, thankfully, there's a lot of great stuff, before 2015 you can still stick with, but I know that it definitely is unfortunate if you want something with, new tech and all that, new safety features. Yeah, I wish I had an answer for you. Unfortunately, I have no clue. I don't personally know any other, unless it's like, yeah, I don't know, if there's anyone who like has any issues with like, radio stuff, anything like that, but that would be an issue you'd have even before 2015. So I have no clue. I wish I could help you with that. I'm sorry about that, but hopefully you can get something figured out. And I'd say at least, try and tweet it, Engineering Explained potentially, and see if he might have anything that, he might be able to chime in about that. I have no clue. But hopefully I hope you get that figured out. And thank you so much again for the super chat. Let me see here. Other questions that I missed. So, Marco says you can always get a 2004 AMG wagon for like 10 to 15 grand and never regret anything ever again. It'd be awesome as long as you're okay to spend another 10 to 15 on maintenance on that car as well. So let me see here. MDTT says, hey, Sean, if you're looking to go for another Kia, take a look at some models with the 1.6 turbo motor. They are great engines, and when you care for them well, they run like absolute tops. Thanks for the suggestion, MD, there, and great to see you guys helping each other out here in the comments. I see Jazzbo has got the other membership there, so thank you so much for that, for grabbing that, Jazz, and congrats on joining the membership club here. Marco says, I always recommend Toyota, and if they want something fancy, or Lexus. Simple, no fans or buts. Yeah, and that's really my go-to thing as well. Whenever someone's like, hey, I want a car with no problems, like, get yourself a Toyota or a Lexus, call it a day. But the Mazdas really have been neck and neck, and I think actually Consumer Reports testing, I think Mazda actually overtook Toyota last year. Again, Consumer Reports is nothing to swear by. They have their imperfections as well, but just another pool to pull from as far as consensuses go. And but yeah, it's always the safe bet, and they know it, and that's why they continue to maintain that reputation, because they know that they're the best, and they gotta stay the best. So that's why they don't have some of the newest tech sometimes and things like that, for that very reason. And Omar also says, is there any Mitsubishi slash Mazda sports car in the near future? Don't think so. I think Mitsubishi, they'll be lucky if they're still around for another 5 years here in the States. As far as Mazda, yeah, the new Miata's coming. That's probably all we're going to get. And that's still probably several years off too. So I think it's have a ways to go for any new things from them. Truck and Garga says, Omar, sadly not likely at all since they, only care about the Outlander and the Eclipse Cross. Yeah, and honestly, it's even just the Outlander. I was talking again with my journalist friends last week, and one of them was saying that their dealer they know who sells Mitsubishis, like they only want to stock Outlanders, like nothing else. Like we don't even order anything other than the Outlander because the Outlander is the only like really good thing that they have right now. And they're like, yeah, none of the other stuff's competitive. If people ask for it, we can get one in and dealer trade it from somewhere else. But they only stock Outlanders and that's it. So it's like they're down to one actual good car these days. So that's why it's like their days are numbered, in my opinion, I think, especially if they don't start capitalizing on the Nissan partnership more. If they start copy and pasting everything with Nissan, putting Mitsubishi badges on them, I think they might have a better future, but it seems like they're strangely not doing that for some reason. So I don't know about Mitsubishi here in the States. And Jazz thinks there are more people that will be watching the Lucid Air video. Yeah, it's just yeah, I mean, if you can go and look too for yourself as far as the Lucid Air thing goes, check out the Audi video. I mean, like I said, 7,000 views. My Model S video, I don't think did great either. That was back in 2019. I had that one, or early 2020 when I posted it. But that one, very few views as well. And most electric stuff in general just doesn't do very well on this channel. So that's why I'm really selective about the electric stuff that I cover, because I know there's a very limited amount of interest in that stuff here. So yeah, and then even expensive stuff usually doesn't do super well on this channel, even if it's gas powered, because it's just unrelatable, I think, for most of you guys. And I totally understand and agree, and so it's just one of those things. I'm actually like, there's been a lot of other stuff too. Like Mercedes, they offered me an EQE. I was actually offered, one of the first people that was offered the EQE 400, I think it was, the sedan. And I turned that down too. I'm like, yeah, I'd be curious to drive it. I'm curious to drive basically anything, but I turned that down. Like, nope, like no one's going to watch that. I turned down so many cars because I'm just like, no one's going to watch this. I gotta be selective with what I do, especially because, whenever I do accept something, not only is it like a waste of time if no one watches it, but that's also time that I'm occupying that I could be spent doing something else. If I do accept a Lucid Air, then I got to spend, 4 or 5 hours filming that. I got to spend 12 hours editing that video. And I could instead spend those several hours driving a few hours to go film a Mustang Mach 1 that's waiting for me, a few hours away, or to go film the Mazda 3 hatch manual that's waiting for me a few hours away. And, so it's like I'm also getting rid of those opportunities basically by accepting press vehicles that don't perform. So that's another reason why I'm being super selective, because I know I have better stuff waiting for me other places. So that's why with the press cars, I accept what I think will do well and the things that I can take a safe bet on. And obviously it's easier, it's cheaper. They drop them off in my driveway. I don't have to pay for gas or anything. It's just dropped off perfectly clean every week, and they swap it, and it's totally, a great experience from that standpoint. But it's just, trying to be smart about my time, unfortunately. And Omar says, Matt, what was the first sports car you remember your parents owning? My parents never owned sports cars, unfortunately. So the first car, yeah, I mean, whenever I was alive, the first car my parents had was a 1988 Ford Tempo, very far from a sports car. Had a whole 88 horsepower, I think, in that thing, and miserable little car. Left us stranded so many times. Just wouldn't start. Alternators would fail all the time. Just one thing after another with that car. And that car actually made my dad swear off Ford after that car. He had an Escort that he loved before I was born, and it was an 84, I think, Ford Escort. It was the hatchback two-door. It was a manual. Him and my mom both drove manuals back then and had a blast in that little Escort. And then that Escort actually ended up getting totaled because he was driving across, if you're familiar with the Pittsburgh area, the Fort Pitt Bridge, one of the bridges that crosses all the rivers right around downtown there. And an 18-wheeler started like coming over and didn't see him, and then like knocked off his mirror, still didn't see him. And he's like still inching over and like getting to the point where like my dad had nowhere to go. And so it somehow wedged the Escort up into the superstructure of the bridge there and lifted it enough that it actually, as the truck was dragging it, rolled it like end over end. And then my dad was like hanging upside down in his Escort. And then the truck finally figured out what was happening and stopped. And my dad was able to crawl out. Thankfully, it didn't have a scratch. And so he was pretty impressed with the Escort, for protecting him there, which is especially, admirable for a car from the 80s, any of them, did really well. So we went out and bought the Tempo because, they were planning on having, kids soon. And so they wanted some of the 4 doors. They got that. And was not a good car. So that was their first vehicle that I, had as a, growing up as a kid. But super unreliable, that Tempo. And so after that, my dad switched to Subaru. That's kind of what started my Subaru, fandom, I guess. And the Impreza Outback Sport, basically the Crosstrek before they called it a Crosstrek, was what he had back in 1997, and swapped the Tempo for that. We kept the Tempo for a little while longer after that. And it was our second car, because before that we only were a 1-car household. So we had the Tempo, and that still struggled on until the early 2000s. And then we finally, they swapped that for a 2001 Volkswagen New Beetle. And that was the other thing that they had whenever I was younger. Anyway, MD says, I do own a 1.6 T Tucson with almost 92K on it, almost or moderately modified, tuned for a decent bit and beat on a good bit. And I do my oil changes before the recommended severe intervals as a precaution. Makes sense. And that's cool. You have a modified Tucson. I don't see too many people modding those. I'd be curious to see, what it looks like. That's pretty cool. Sean's guessing, okay, I'm glad you guys are chiming in about a WX guy. And so they're saying maybe the new car smell. That is a very good idea about, the new materials being used. That's a great, thank you guys for much better suggestion than I'm able to say. That's great. All right. So, and he's also saying never consumed a drop of oil in the 1.6 there. So great that it's running great for you. Some people are really bothered by the new car smell. I never knew that. I've learned something new today, thanks to you guys. So new car smell, that could be it. Thank you so much, guys, for all that. Sean says, I watch all your reviews. Sometimes I skip on the boring cars. Yeah, and that's what I've noticed is, the boring stuff is certainly a little bit of a tougher sell. If it's boring, but I'm doing it on the embargo, so it's hot news, and if it's something that has mass appeal and they sell well, and I know it's going to be researched a lot, then I will do those boring cars. But otherwise, I usually try and avoid the boring stuff as well, unless there's some type of overlap that I think could make sense. Like, for example, my Prius video did really well. It was like my second top video of last year. And then, so I decided I typically would not review the new Kia Niro because I feel like that's not super exciting for most of you guys. But I decided to take the Niro because I'm like, okay, well, if there's a lot of interest in Priuses and a lot of people watch my Prius video, YouTube may recommend them another hybrid if they're shopping in that segment. So I took the Niro, and like I'm going to be posting that review this week here on the new Niro. A boring car that a lot of you probably won't be interested in, but it's a good car, even if it's not exciting, and it has exciting styling at least and stuff. So, but there's some of that bargaining that I do. So I'll do some stuff that might not be an out of the park home run. And I know that going into it, but I think maybe there's potential. And if it's offered to me and it's easy because it's a press vehicle, then I will do some of that stuff. So there's certainly, none of my rules are hard and fast. It's just kind of an approximation of trying to, guesstimate my way through this and, try and make the best choices I can make. But then again, sometimes with YouTube, they surprise me. And again, Prius, who would have thought, if you would have told me 5 years ago, Prius was my second best performing video of last year, I would have never believed you. I would have been laughing in your face. And now here we are. It helps the Prius is awesome now, but just that name and stuff. And same thing, the most view video from last year was the new Toyota Sequoia. Again, could not have told me the Sequoia would have been a top video. It's just crazy. So that's part of why I take a chance sometimes, because there's things I'm like, no one's going to watch this, and people do. But with EVs, it's been pretty consistently like no one's going to watch it, especially if it's expensive. So I've been a little more selective. Linda, thank you so much for the super chat. She says, money for your daughter for Easter. Thank you. That's very sweet of you. She says, I used Shell 93 and Costco 93, so hope that works. Yeah, I don't know if the Costco is a top tier one, but I think they are these days. So I'm sure both those will be great for sure. And thank you so much once again for the super chat. Hope you have a great Easter as well, Linda, and all of you here coming up in a few weeks. So we got about another 2 minutes or so. I apologize, I didn't get caught up on all of the member questions here. I'm going to try and cover as many here. I'll do some rapid fire here for the last couple of minutes here. Here we see. Moz is doing good things, Marco says, but They haven't done it for quite as long, which is why, yeah, you don't recommend them as much as Toyota. Makes sense. Yeah. Sean says, I always say Porsche, I may be trash, but I'm not a Philistine. Very well said, Sean. Yeah, same here. It's yeah, I know Porsche even put out a video a few years ago saying, like, here's how you say it, because they're annoyed with people saying it wrong. Shrugging Car Guy says it's frustrating as a Mitsubishi owner since they can borrow things, yeah, like we were saying, from Nissan, and they're just not doing it. Marco says he has a soft spot for Mitsubishi. The Eclipse was the dream car. Yeah, those Eclipses were so awesome. They just didn't follow through with the awesomeness like they used to. And Dorian says, thoughts on the Toyota Crown? Odd lineup, seems huge, kind of cool. I still haven't driven it. I will be getting a Crown. That was another one I was taking a risk on. Toyotas, though, typically do pretty well, even if they're not the most exciting on my channel. The Crown doesn't seem to have much hype, though. I know my brother-in-law works at a Toyota dealer, and he's saying that, like, basically most other Toyotas, they're still pre-selling them. Crown, there's like hardly any demand for. So if you want a good deal on a new Toyota that gets good fuel economy too, seems like Crowns, could be a pretty good deal here, kind of like the Avalon, where there's not a whole lot of demand. So yeah, but I will be testing it out myself and seeing how they are soon. MD, I appreciate the offer to come review your Tucson. Send me a message if you're not too far. Especially if I can bundle it with another review, it's certainly something I'd be open to reviewing. Because I'm all about reviewing some, unique stuff as well. I think that'd be really cool, and provide new perspectives as far as the enthusiast scene goes, and what other people would do. It's out of the usual normal stuff that everyone does. It's cool to see some stuff out of the ordinary, and I think a lot of other people would appreciate that as well. Marco says, due to the truck driver accidents like that, absolutely fuel my nightmares. Thank God I'm on top of my stuff, but still nightmare fuel. I'm glad he came out okay. There's a lot of those crazy accidents where it's like, I don't know how people survive, but they do. It's nuts. All right, let me see here. Jay says, might want to talk to your doctor. Sounds like health related issues there. Two Track Jack says, don't forget to drop a like, everyone. Yeah, always appreciate the likes on the videos. That certainly does help. And I think we're actually going to get caught up here. Marco has the last comment I see here. He says, all I want is an electric wagon and I'll be happy. I'd say Ioniq 5 is kind of close to that in some ways. It's an electric hot hatch kind of in some ways, in my opinion. And Ioniq 5 is a great car. So yeah, anyway, we have hit the 2-hour mark here, though, so I'm going to have to cut it off. But thank you all for joining. Sorry I didn't get to everyone's questions, but if you do have a question you still want me to answer, always feel free to, drop me a comment. I'm really good about answering comments on YouTube here, or, if you want to drop a Facebook message, I do answer some messages on there. And also, I do these every single week as well, so be sure to join next week as well. If you'd like to ask some more questions, and we'll get to them then, hopefully, as well. But anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you all have a great week here coming up, and a great rest of your Sunday as well. Thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.